This is the D6 generation with your hosts, Craig Gallant.
No, cut that. Keep that. Someday it's going to be worth something.
Russ Wakeland.
You put me in an ATST with frickin' Wookiees attacking me and whatnot?
Now you're talking. And Ash Barker in the third chair.
Dad jokes.
With contributions from Total Fangirl
Vampires do not sparkle.
and our loyal listeners.
Crazy? That's like 400 hours of gamer nonsense.
Welcome to another edition of Rapid Fire, the roundtable discussion of all things gaming, covered at the speed of a big alien with 3 sets of extra legs, fast and flight pack. Today's edition is brought to you by all of our friends over at Patreon that help us keep the lights on and keep this whole crazy train rolling. Today, Matthew McFarland, Mermuse, Mike, just plain Mike Schaefer, and either Mrs. Aureus or Mr. Saurius twice. I don't even know. I'm Keekley McNary, your host today. Our panelists are Russ William Sled Wakeland, and YouTube battler and bruiser and all-around nice guy, Ash Blimey Cow Barker, creator, purveyor, and prolific master of the Guerrilla Miniature Games channel. Let's begin. Issue number 1. YouTube was founded in 2005 by 3 men working for PayPal at the time. It launched on Monday, February 14th at 9:13 p.m. Since then, millions of videos have been uploaded to the site and billions of views have been recorded of everything from great video battle reports to cute kitten videos. Despite only placing 9th in PC World's top 10 best products list for that year, it has now single-handedly changed the way the world creates, views, and shares videos. Question: what was the title of the first video ever to be uploaded to YouTube? Rucka Rucka Ollie Russ.
Cats on cats.
Alfie Days Ash.
Dude, look at my ham sandwich.
That's so close, and yet so wrong. Meet me at the zoo. Showing co-founder Jawed Karim at the San Diego Zoo. Issue number 2. When a gamer gets to a certain age, when career, family, and other pressures start to squeeze him or her for everything they're worth, it can often be hard to find time to do any gaming, never mind playing the game, learning the game, preparing a table, and collecting, building, and painting the forces you need to battle across those imaginary battlefields of the mind. Question: on a scale of 1 through 10, with 1 being Harper Lee and 10 being Spanish novelist Corinne Telledo, how likely is an average married gamer in their late 30s to early 40s with at least 1 child to play more than 4 different game systems in a quarter? Ryuki Inoue Russ.
47%.
Jiro Akagawa Ash.
3 to the power of 10%.
Right. It was a 1 through 10 scale. So both of you are wrong on a mathematical level. But I was going to go with, you got to be a 10 to call yourself a gamer. Am I right? Right? Never mind, you're bad at math. Issue number 3. Guerrilla Miniature Games has been around for just about 2 years, reviewing miniatures games of all sizes and stripes, as well as looking at publishers, a wide variety of miniatures, terrain, and other gadgets to enhance your miniature gaming experience. The sheer number of games and publishers that have been covered on that show is awe-inspiring. Question: how many different games have been played on the Guerrilla Miniature Games channel since its arrival on the scene? Roadkill Russ.
Oh, this feels like a softball to me for Ash. I refuse to answer on the grounds it's unfair.
Epic Ash.
I have no idea. I'm going to say close to 100.
I came up with 47 just individual actual focused episodes, which I think means that you probably have somewhere in the vicinity of 1 to 150 overall mentions. So I'm just going to give that to Ash and make Russ wrong on general principle. Issue number 4. Capturing the chaotic ebb and flow of real battle, where moment by moment just about anything could shift the momentum of war in one direction or another, is an impossible task. But each game must somehow tackle the issue as one of their first foundational rules. Whether it's you go, I go, alternating activation, or something more esoteric, even chess dictates when you are allowed to do what. Question: what is the fairest way to address this issue in a miniatures game? Retinue Skirmish Russ.
Interactive turns with random initiative orders.
Arcane Warfare Ash.
I'd say active or reactive declaration where you combine the game turn.
Well, I like that.
Both of you taking it so seriously, which makes you sadly wrong. Dexterity, rubber bands. It's tried, it's true. The last toy soldier standing is clearly the winner. You could put your eye out, of course, but anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for listening and good night.
This episode of the D6 Generation is brought to you by
Battle Foam, protecting your army so you don't have to.
And the War Store, bringing the war to your door since 1999, and that is for a decade or more. Hello!
Hello.
Hey, and welcome to episode 211, Craig.
That sounds like an important phone number, 211.
Yes, right.
That was my house number growing up.
Excellent. Ooh,
I knew it was
very
important.
poignant.
Serendipity.
So episode 211 of the D6 Generation. I am, in fact, Russ Wakeland.
I am and I've always been Craig Gallant.
I've been Ash Barker all my life.
Excellent. Ash, welcome to the show.
Barker
this
of
is-
Guerrilla Miniatures Games fame.
Super excited to have you on the show, Ash, tonight. Ash is, I would say, Craig, Ash, what would be your official title there at Guerrilla Miniature Games?
Stay-at-home dad.
Stay at home. I love it.
There you go. See, got the
man with his
important one
priorities
right up front.
straight. That, in addition, chief cook and bottle washer and dude who makes all the videos, I think is pretty much where it goes. Something like that.
Yeah, that's it. That's me.
Driving force, most prolific game player I've ever met.
I know, right?
There's a bunch of things you could add in there.
So since we've got the man who makes bajillions of great miniature YouTube videos on our show, we have to ask, first we're going to chat with Ash a little about how he got into all that and how the heck he does it, right? How did that get done? And then later, of course, since Ash plays a metric ton of miniature games, and we've been accused of playing quite a few ourselves, we thought we'd talk about this.
Although we don't think that anymore.
No. Ash has sort of set a bar now that is quite, frankly, unachievable by anyone else. We want to talk about this thing that Ash has coined and Craig started picking up called Miniature Agnostic Gaming. What do you do for rule sets where you want to use your own miniatures, maybe with some new rules? So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show as well. But before we get to all that, we should talk a little about the lost chapters.
Yes.
When last we were in Dunkin' Donuts, we bumped into Ash. And Ash, do you remember what we chatted about in Dunkin' Donuts?
Besides the fallacy that Tim Hortons is the greatest coffee of all time.
Yes.
We had a few things there. There was a few sort of like key industry bits that we talked about.
Yeah, and where we find the time to paint was sort of a overriding theme as well. What do we do there? And Craig, do you remember how someone wanted to listen to Ash talk about his industry themes and explain why, although he's Canadian, Tim Hortons may not be the best choice?
He was just eager to break every preconception we might have had. Exactly. It got testy.
It did.
I have being the world's worst Canadian.
Right. If you ever want to meet an impolite Canadian, no, I'm teasing.
That's true.
So Craig, how does one go about getting access to the Lost Chapter?
Go to our website, thed6generation.com, and click on the Patreon button that you will find on the right-hand margin, and it'll bring you right to our page. Or go to patreon.com, search for the D6 Generation, and that will bring you right to the page. And you support the show. You kick in a little extra money every episode, and that funds our trips to these places and gets these people to recognize us and see what we're doing, and that we can then bring back to you. So if you are able to pledge $2 an episode, you get every Lost Chapter unlocked, kind of like Netflix.
Instantly.
All at once in one big giant flood.
Right. It's like hours and hours of extra content.
Of mediocrity. It's great.
We can't really...
More hours spent in coffee shops than in high school.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Sadly, that is probably now the case.
Probably now the case. So thank you for that, Craig. And what's it time now for, Craig?
It's time for me to reach over here and go, Achievements in Gaming.
It is indeed a time for Achievements in Gaming. And, of course, Achievements is brought to us by all of our fine patrons over there that keep the lights on. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. So what have we been playing lately? Ash, what have you been playing? What's been getting to the table? Or what hasn't? Your list is probably short of what you don't play, but go ahead.
Well, that's true. I've been prepping for a Wrath of Kings thing we're doing this summer. We're going to be doing some Wrath of Kings, just like Escalation League. I've got 5 guys each doing a different faction because there's only 5 factions in the game, and it's pretty cool. It's kind of like Game of Thrones, but with like a magical apocalypse. Right. So there's this one king that unites all the humans, and then he dies. And the Scion Kings that are all his kids go off and like claim a part of the world. Oh, cool. But to hold it all together after he dies, they all make pacts with someone. They either make pacts with like science or demons or like deep ones and become all of these like radically different factions. And so each of us is picking one, and we're going to do some So I'm playing, and so I'm kind of like the Castlevania faction.
Oh, nice.
The Scion King's son went up and went to the mountains where it's all grim ghosts and ghouls, and he had to make pacts with basically what they call the gift. And the gift is this thing that it used to just hunt all the humans, and now it picks you basically, and you become like a vampire or werewolf. And the society is now sort of like integrated all the monsters, so it's pretty cool. The model's really nice, and I'm pretty stoked for it. So we've been doing a lot of painting for that. And then the other thing is Shadow War Armageddon. It's got me buying the odd box of miniatures I've been thinking about buying for a while, which I think was the intent of the game, which has been pretty great.
Nice. Very cool. That sounds exciting.
Absolutely.
Always fun. So Ash, when you get into a new miniature game like that, what do you use to decide which faction you're going to get excited about?
Oh, I just pick based on models. For me, it's always like
so rules
it's whichever one
it's all about the look
right? First.
Exactly. That's how I am.
I don't even look at. I don't even open the book until
Who cares how
I've already built my own model usually.
Exactly the same. Craig, how about yourself? What have you been playing lately?
I've been playing stuff that we played right before or picked up at Adepticon. So I've gotten 2 more games of Rune Wars Miniatures Game is in.
How you liking it? Holding up?
Played with I ran. My concern is still there for the depth of. I mean, with the breadth of the factions, we'll seed that for now. I mean, they just announced that the elves will be coming out in the third quarter, which might mean maybe an early release at Gen Con, which would be neat.
That'd be nice.
So that would be cool. But I'm concerned about the lack of depth in the factions, in the 2 factions that we have. So you've got basically 2 units and a monster and a hero for each.
Now, have you experimented? You got 2 sets now, right?
I do now have. Yes,
you
I put together
with different formations? Yeah. Because even though there's only different model types, there are ways you can configure them to.
That is true. Yeah. Also, there's also items that will change them a lot. So
it's X-wing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's literally X-wing. It's X-wing right flank. Yeah,
exactly. I am provisionally hopeful.
Okay.
How do you feel about the battlefield clutter? Because there's all kinds of dials and cardboard and stuff on the table. Because to me, that's a real that breaks my immersion in a game. I need to be able to hear the horns. You know what I mean? And
say
there's all
that really pushes the yeah. So I would say it pushes the aesthetic for me.
Yeah.
It does kind of break the fourth wall in a way that I don't really enjoy too much. But at the same time, so far I've only been playing either in demos or with unpainted models on a bare, grassy field at home.
Right.
So when I get some cooler stuff in, and I don't know, I mean, there's a lot of little things that I don't know will translate. The fact that for tournaments and everything, you're going to be using the cardboard terrain unless you go all out and some guys have already made 3D representations with the exact same footprint.
Dimensions.
Yeah, which. People did for the asteroids and stuff for X-Wing, which was cool. Without that, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to watch it develop. I like the gameplay. I like the gameplay a lot. Your brother wasn't a big fan. Actually, he won. Joe wasn't a big fan, Russ.
So John was a big fan because he won? Or you?
No, well, I mean, he generally is more open to enjoying a game he wins. I mean, I think that's most of us. But anyway, so a couple of those games. Rogue Stars, I've gotten 3 more games of that in.
Nice.
And that's fun. I still have a blast with that. I do want to break away from Star Wars. I think we found, Russ, that it brings with it a whole raft of expectations.
I've thought more about that. I have more
thoughts. What's that?
I have more
We'll
thoughts.
talk more about that in a bit.
When I get to my section,
good. Can't wait. Okay, I'll leave that to you then.
It's good thoughts. It's good thoughts.
You had a bit of an issue. Okay. And then we did run through the rules of On Guard, so we could get an idea of how it translated from the book onto the table. So that was my games. What about you, Russ?
All right. Well, let's start with Rogue Stars. So go for a segue here. So I haven't played a lot either. I had a lot of travel for business, so got a lot of gaming in at Adepticon back-to-back with PAX East. So this time around, really only played a few games with Craig. I got a Rogue Star game in and then On Guard. And I will say, I think the reason I enjoyed the first, so we played Rogue Stars at Adepticon. I loved it. And then we played it again at the local store here, and I was not as enchanted with it. And it really came down to, as we mentioned, Craig has made up, Star Wars inside using the Rogue Star rules. And we played at Adepticon. It was sort of heroes on heroes. It was a bunch of characters, bounty hunters, all who were basically, heroes, against a bunch of the Rebellion heroes. When we played at the store, it was the Rebellion heroes against a bunch of stormtroopers.
Bunch of plebs, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I think the problem ends up happening here is Rogue Stars doesn't do a good job of making a bunch of troopers. It's really designed for a group of heroes against a group of heroes. And because of the minimum point values, I think, for a 70-point thing and stuff, you can't really make like a grunt. So what ended up happening was the stormtroopers were
you could, but even that, you can only have 6 of them.
Right, and that's the problem. So I feel like it's cool I think it's meant to be a bunch of cool heroes against a bunch of cool heroes fighting it out. I think it would work great under that mode. When you're trying to make grunts on one side, everybody's got to be a little tough, so it's like they didn't feel like stormtroopers to me. Like the one stormtrooper was like absorbing, he must have taken like 20 shots before he went down.
Russ was expecting every stormtrooper to hit his head on the door as he was walking. I'm just saying,
you've never seen a blaster bolt.
Open the blast door.
Well, yeah, when have you ever seen a blaster bolt deflect off a stormtrooper armor? It just doesn't happen. I don't know why they wear that stuff. It doesn't matter. So it just didn't work for me, because I was making it Star Wars, it didn't work. But if they had been other heroes, like if that had been Vader,
I was going more for Rogue One. Okay. More of a gritty, realistic feel.
Still, I don't think your armor blocked a lot of bullets. But still, just saying. So that was my only problem. I think it's an awesome game, though, for hero on hero. Like, if you make both sides a bunch of heroes, it'll work. So I do like Rogue Stars still, but I don't think it works for grunts on either side of the battlefield. That's my thought. Whatever that's worth. And then we tried On Guard. We'll talk more about the On Guard mechanics, too, when we get into the miniature agnostic gaming. But I also enjoyed what that was trying to do. I thought it was an interesting idea. So there was that.
It was interesting.
So what about modeling? Ash, what have you been building lately or painting?
Outside of the Wrath of King stuff, which I've just finished my patrol level of Gritzy, which is the werewolves and the vampires and stuff. Yeah. And it's interesting because that game uses a points-free system. So it has, it has slots basically instead of points. So everything is either rank 1 or rank 2. And when you play a game, you pick a size basically of game, and it's patrol, skirmish, or battle. And that unlocks how many ranks of any one thing you can have, and you can combine ranks. Take a rank 2 guy. So if you have 3 available ranks of heroes, you can take 3 rank 1 heroes or a rank 2 and a rank 1. If you have 18 ranks of infantry available, you can mix that between like rank 1 and rank 2 infantry. So it doesn't do it's not a granular point system, and so it makes unit selection really easy. And you actually you have leader models that form like the nexus of your army.
Oh, that's cool.
And then keywords of who they can command. So your activations in your activation pool are just your leader models, and they pull everybody with the same keyword with them. So you're kind of like designing units as you go. So your units are all very ad hoc. So like for the vampires, for instance, they have what are called mesmers, and they have sword dancers, and the sword dancers are the fighters, and the mesmers are these like control units that can like remove attack dice from like enemy models. And you kind of mix them together with the Zeddy leaders, and you get this neat mixed unit of guys. And it's the same with the Scorza, which are the big werewolves. You get skirmishers, which are these fast-moving like blitzers, and then you get Scorza knights, who are these like super heavy armored werewolves that they can trade their movement for like more attacks. And so you have this mixed unit of like the guys who engage up front, and then once you're engaged, these slow-moving heavy hitters that come in and just sort of pound you afterwards. So it's really neat. Cool. It's and it's been fun to paint because I can just kind of paint a little bit of everything, and then mix it and match it in game, right? So like, I basically just started off by saying I'll paint one of every type of model, and try the game. And I like that because I'm a model first kind of guy. It just let me jump in and do that. And then the second one was, of course, as everyone else, we did Shadow War Armageddon, and basically got permission to buy that one box of miniatures from Games Workshop that we wanted to buy forever, but didn't want to build an army for. So I went and bought the new Death Watch box and the Genestealer Cult box that I've been eyeballing like forever when I picked up my copy of the game. And I was just like super jazzed, like just to build like, because my favorite thing is to paint. Like I think we talked about that. Is the we're talking about sort of like how you paint. Is I like games where my investment of time is rewarded quickly. You know what I mean? Because I could build like one 40K army, or I could play like 10 other little skirmish games.
Right, exactly.
And so Games Workshop hasn't really in the last little while done a lot of like framework for giving people the ability to just like paint that little group of miniatures they really like, and spend a lot of time on them and convert them and make them like really personalized, and then still get that reward of playing the game.
Right.
Outside of Kill Team kind of let them do that. But this game is all about that, right? This game is literally just second edition 40K. So you can play this like nice detailed miniature game, and you can use exactly the miniatures you want. You can equip them however you want, and you just get to go to town on this little group of models. So I'm currently sitting here while we're talking, painting Chaos Cultists for my Night Lord's Kill Team.
I was going to ask, if you're painting while you're on, so you're painting the cultist right now. Awesome.
Yeah, I'm painting for the Dark Vengeance Cultists. My Night Lord's Kill Team is actually entirely converted out of the Dark Vengeance box, because the 5 Space Marine veterans that come in that box
they're beautiful,
are the nicest Chaos Space Marine miniatures. Period. Like, no, they haven't made nicer ones. So I would just, and I didn't want to do it like, I'm not going to buy 20 Dark Vengeances to make my entire Chaos Space Marine army into those, but I can paint 5 minutes.
A Kill Team is great.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's very cool.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I love it. Craig, what about you? What are you working on?
Playing with Rogue Stars on the spaceship, the Hearst Arts spaceship terrain that I made for Star Wars, those many years ago. I got all excited. I first played with old Andy at his house, and that's when we actually rolled up the starship, and I was like, oh crap, I don't have a star. Oh wait, I've got these pieces that were of course half destroyed in the Great Flood of 2016. So I fixed those all up. I did a lot of repair work on those pieces. You can still see on Twitter, you can see some of them are still warped, but they looked really cool. But I didn't have some pieces of a spaceship that I wanted, because it was always just like the interior of a Star Destroyer or Death Star or something like that. So I never really needed stuff. So I built a bridge. And I'm super excited how it came out. And I found a bunch of old Antonicetti's workshop resin pieces that I bought years and years and years ago, when apparently I had plans to do this and then stopped. Bridge control consoles and all kinds of cool stuff. So I did that. I did a couple more random rooms. So I will eventually be able to do a full 3x3 board of a spaceship interior. That was really exciting because I've been waiting to do that for a long time. I assembled both of the Rune Wars starter that Adepticon was kind enough to give us, and my writer's copy that I got in the mail the few days after I got home. And it took several hours. I'm afraid now coming out of this, it doesn't really pass the Christmas morning test, Matt Hart's Christmas morning test. You're not going to open this up and be playing in like a half hour, 45 minutes between the cardboard and the wheels and the dials.
He said that about Guild Ball, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that was his
season
big
3,
kickoff.
the season 3 kickoff. Yeah. That's funny. I can totally hear him saying that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So it didn't do that, but it's still cool models, and I really enjoy it. And I'm looking forward to painting those up. And then to piggyback on what Ash was talking about, Shadow Wars Armageddon, I did get a box, and it was cool, and you can follow that little adventure on Twitter if you're interested in the minutia of it. But thinking that I might be able to get a game in on Tuesday this week, I went through all my old 40K stuff, and I was sad to see how disrespectful I had been towards these models.
Oh, no.
But I dug through a bin, and actually I put them in a bin, Russ. I don't even know what I was thinking. I've got all of my old metal Grey Knights. I've got a bunch of old cultists. I've got a bunch of both Inquisitorial, Imperial Guard, and the old Steel Legion army that I had. So it was really cool bringing all those out and having a game that I know for a fact these guys will plug right into as soon as I can find somebody to play with me. So that was a really neat. So I went through all the terrain that came in the box, which I don't know how practical it's going to be to like sort of build a table around that, because it seems like it's going to be very expensive for not a lot of cover and interactive sort of pieces, but they look really neat. They're very, very grim dark, which I haven't really worked with in many, many years. So that was really neat.
Oh, nice.
What about you, Russ?
Well, I did get a little modeling in, so I finished. So after having lost terribly to Menoth John at Adepticon with my Trollkin.
Oh, but you came so close.
Well, I don't know if it was as close as it looked, but it was fun. But I wanted
or maybe it wasn't as close as you told me it was right after the game. And now you've, in retrospect, you're like, I don't want to embarrass myself.
As adrenaline drained away. But I did have my war wagon for my trolls there almost done. I just had to base it. So I finished basing it, and then I took some pictures with the Table Wars, photo backdrop stuff. Really like how that came down. I tweeted that out if you want to look at that.
Beautiful pictures.
Really like how that. It really does make it look like a professional photo, doesn't it? It's like, wow, that's pretty.
Is those like off matte, like blended color backgrounds? Are they great?
Yeah,
it's like
they make everything look like it's pro painted on eBay.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like the stuff that was behind you when you're taking grade school pictures, right? In school.
Yeah.
Nice. Then also, we've been playing a lot of D&D with the family, and we're getting all the miniatures for the party done. And my youngest daughter's druid, she wanted to get a new miniature, so I just painted that up for her. And now I am literally, while Ash is working on his stuff, I just started to I'm assembling a giant bear because her druid often turns into a bear. So I'm building.
Nice.
I found this.
Where'd you get the bear? I know you were looking for one.
I found one. It's actually a Reaper Mini. It's actually a dire bear, but it's a cool sculpt. It's like standing on its hind legs,
Yeah.
So I tell you, can I pimp a product line right now?
Yeah, sure.
For a bear?
Yeah.
So if your daughter needs a female druid that turns into a bear miniature, my buddy Sean from Relic Blade literally has that as a pack. Like you can buy a female druid with a bear, and in the game she turns into a bear.
I'm on there now.
If you haven't checked out Relic Blade, that's another one that I would recommend you guys check out because it's the game I'm going to teach. It's the miniature game I'll teach my kids to play first.
Oh, nice.
Oh, cool.
I'm looking at it. I'm on their website right now. I'm going to go check it out.
It's the perfect mix of accessible and fun. And he just released his latest expansion for it that has all the campaign rules and advancement rules and stuff.
We talked to him briefly at Adepticon, and I think we're going to try to get him on the show.
You should. He is a fabulous talent.
And he did solve the bear problem. So I don't know if everybody's aware that there is a bear problem, but there is one. And I'll explain the bear problem. So the bear problem is...
Sorry, go ahead.
You actually probably know the bear problem. So the bear problem is that either there's only two types of bear sculpts out there. Most of them are by not really high-end sculptors, and they're usually just sitting there very calmly on all four legs looking around like they're about to harvest some berries or something, right? Not a very intimidating model. Or you have dire bears, and they're usually in a pretty cool pose, like the one I got is on its hind legs, swinging its claws, which looks cool, but it's a dire bear, so it's got little extra bits that aren't really very bear-like poking out, so you got to file them off or do something. But what your friend here, Ash, has done...
Sounds moderately disturbing.
What your friend here, Ash, done is he's got a cool-looking bear. Now, there is an awesome bear in Guild Ball. The Hunters have an amazing bear.
Yes.
But that bear...
it's all armored.
It's right. It's got all equipment on it, which doesn't really work either. So your friend here...
cool piece on this bear, too, when you look at this bear, if you notice, it's got an amulet on its neck that the druid's also wearing.
Oh, that's hot. See?
And that, ties them together, because, the amulet's the thing that helps you transform.
Right. And in D&D, you can actually choose as a druid to either have your clothing go away and become part of the animal, or part of it can adapt. As long as the DM rules, the clothing can still work on the bear. And that'd be perfect. That's a really cool, fluffy thing. So I'm gonna order this too, because she's going to be.
You can never have too many bears.
Well, so
now I have another friend, Dez, who makes a miniature game called The Roots of Magic, which is a wizard dueling game. Who has a third druid option that also turns into a bear. So,
see, you found all the bears.
There's no bear problem, Russ. Your bear problem is there are too many bears to choose
Ash
from.
has solved the bear problem.
Solution, just so you know.
That's right. Ash is the solution to the. See, we went from not knowing there was a problem to identifying a problem to solving a problem inside 5 minutes in the show. That is fantastic. It's one of those things
where you can't really name I like a model for. I probably can find you a model for almost anything. That should just be a game. We could just do a game where can you find a model for?
That's awesome. Like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but it's 6 degrees of Ash's minis.
That's right. 6 degrees of miniature sculpting.
Awesome. So that's my modeling. What about other random stuff like reading comic books, any geeky books, TV shows? Ash, what have you been doing in that front? Anything?
So I am currently rereading The Gunslinger by Stephen King.
Ooh, excellent choice. I love that series.
So the movie's coming out relatively soon, and I'm pretty jazzed about the movie because he's got the horn, which means that this isn't going to be the books, right? So the new Idris Elba Gunslinger, I'm actually really looking forward to seeing the movie because I know I'm going to be surprised by it because he's the Horn of Elb. You've seen it in the photo, and he doesn't have the Horn of Elb in the book, and that gives away the fact that this is. Different. This is the Gunslinger, but this is the next. What do they say? There's other worlds than these, right? So that's the saying in the Gunslinger. There's always other worlds than these.
Well, there's other worlds than these.
Another Roland Deschain and another Man in Black, basically having their palaver in the first movie. And so I'm rereading the original ones, and it's funny, they hold up really well. Mostly because all the time jumping is intentional. So you don't get taken out of. When he wrote them, the 80s was the current time. So the character from the 80s, the one of his cat's head that's from the 80s, is supposed to be like the person that you're familiar with. You know what I mean? Like everything in his world is familiar, because you're living in the 80s too. And growing up in the 80s, it's all relatively familiar, but it holds up really well. Like it's really well done. And I forgot how much I liked it. And I liked post-apocalyptic, Westerns. Yes. and I'm currently, I've just sort of wrapped up a series on the old, Games Workshop historical game, Legends of the Old West. Mm-hmm. And we stole a bunch of our characters from the Gunslinger, so we were kind of reading that for inspiration and stuff as well.
That's awesome. I love those books. I think I'm going to reread them myself. I just finished another series, and I would like to do that because I've read them already 3 times in my life. It's worth another read. Those are so good.
There's also there's that one standalone he has too.
Yes.
What was it called? It's like a campfire story, which is really, really good.
There's a couple.
But they've just. I'm also now excited because they've just done the 2017 catalog for Osprey.
Yeah.
And one of the books in there, the releases for this coming year, is Dracula's America.
Yeah.
And it's an Old West miniature game where Dracula becomes president of the United States in like the 1800s. Yeah. And it sounds amazing. So I'm pretty excited about that too. More Old Westerny sci fantasy stuff.
Oh, if you've not read Hearts of Atlantis by Stephen King, that also ties into the Gunslinger universe in sort of a weird way.
All of his books do.
Well, all of his
travels
books
through all his other books.
He does that, yes. But I mean, in Hearts of Atlantis was written after Gunslinger and kind of ties some of the protagonists show up there in kind of a weird way. It's pretty cool.
Oh, neat.
But yeah, definitely, I love Stephen King stuff's awesome. Always good stuff. Cool. Craig, how about you, sir?
Well, let's see. I went and I saw Ghost in the Shell.
What'd you think? It's getting kind of not good
like
reviews.
It.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was not impressed. I went in hoping to be impressed. Visually stunning. I love that most of the reviews are comparing it to the visual stunningness of Avatar.
So that means that's not really good.
Because I would say, oh yeah, I get it, because they were both pretty much lame on story and had really cool visuals. Yeah. In my opinion.
Does it not follow the Puppet Master storyline of the original film?
I'm not familiar with the original, so I don't know.
Because my understanding was it follows it. Even there's like some shots that they take out of the original film that are in the current film. Like they actually do like some repros of the original shot, like shots, like the intro and stuff. It could.
Like I said, I'm not. I watched the original way long decades ago, and so I don't really remember much, if anything, of it. But
it might. I was going to say it might be one of those things where it was almost too much made for the fans. If you're not, if you weren't able to get into it, you know what I mean?
Yep. Because I like the world is great. It's cool. The story has just seemed very kind of shallow to me, I guess. So that was disappointing. Not disappointing was the Black Sails series finale.
Oh, yeah. Good, huh?
Which was phenomenal and awesome and completely does what they said they were going to do in the very first season, in the very first episode, where they said, this is going to be a prequel to Treasure Island.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. And so... And it's awesome because it's the way they do it in the end, and they explain, like in a really cool storytelling way, how everything, like you've experienced this over the last 3 years, and this is what you saw. But stories have their own life. Oh, it's really cool, really very, very, very satisfying. I was super excited. Walking Dead season finale, not so much. I'll just leave that at that. APB is now. See, Russ, have you seen any of it yet?
No, but you told me. I keep looking at it. I keep staring at it, and then go watch something else.
I keep telling you need to, because I need to know. And they just did something in the last episode that I saw that I know is not possible.
Okay.
So now I'm like, okay, see, I really don't think that maybe it's as cool and gadgety, and maybe it's just like, techno babble. So I need you to help me out on that. Okay. The Expanse, though, is still awesome.
It is. Oh, God.
Yeah, that's still going strong. And I'm re-listening to the Witcher books, and I still love those. I'm getting ready to read the new one that just came out. So that's me. What about you, Russ?
So I have to give a shout out to a couple of amazing gaming stores. So I happen
you've been traipsing around the country.
Well, yes, I try to take a page from our friend Angelo's book, and whenever I travel about for business, I try to stop in gaming stores if there's any nearby. And I happened to go to Dallas to visit our office down there. And while I was there, I managed to visit 2 gaming stores. One is Texas Toy Soldiers. These are both like on the outskirts of Dallas, so they're maybe 20 minutes outside the center of the city. Texas Toy Soldiers, really amazingly well-stocked miniature gaming store. All they do is miniature games. They have everything, all the major lines, plus a lot of the smaller stuff, Osprey and everything else. Also, a fantastic set of 4 different lines of paint. They had the Vallejo, they had P3, they have GW, they have everything else too. Like some paints I never heard of before. Amazing basic materials, a great place to play in the back. Also, amazing little bits that you could buy on little blisters, just generic third-party bits from various internet providers you normally only find online were there to buy for just really good depth products. So had a great experience there. So again, Texas Toy Soldiers is fantastic. And the other one I visited, this store blew me away. Madness Games and Comics is literally, if you took the vendor hall, from Adepticon and made a gaming store out of it, and then stapled a Newberry Comics on the side of it, that's what this would be.
Really?
So, literally, there's 4 rows of just board games, and the store is huge. The store is like the size of a Walmart, all right? I mean, I'm not exaggerating, because everything's bigger in Texas. This literally is this big. And there's a whole section of, fandom stuff, like Newberry Comics times 2, all the little pop figures, T-shirts, huge rows. They've got rows and rows of comics, like aisles in a grocery store. One row, all alphabetized, just Marvel heroes. One whole set of aisles, just DC. One whole set of aisles, just Black Horse. Just boom, boom. It's a huge thing, all organized. Then they have games the same way. They have a whole row, whole double aisle of just War Machine, whole double aisle of just GW, whole double aisle of just figures for Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, it was amazing. Board games, a huge place to play. Simply amazing. If you happen to be in Dallas, both these stores are fantastic. If you only hit one, I would hit Madness just because I've never seen a gaming store this big before. And I don't know how they stay in business because the square footage cost must be insane. But they were mobbed. They were hopping. So definitely check out Madness.
Sounds awesome.
Comics. Really, really cool.
Was it Madness?
It was Madness, Ash. It was total madness. A very appropriate name.
I
did put pictures up. I did put pictures up too on Twitter. And
Dad
Facebook.
jokes? Dad
jokes, yes. Also, had an experiment with my daughter. So my youngest daughter and I, every once in a while, just go out and do some kind of science experiment in a nearby parking lot. So last year we did the Mentos thing, right? So we got a bunch of soda bottles, dropped some Mentos in there, saw what happened. This time around, she was asking about the lights. In the movie, Tangled, those little lights in the paper things float away. So they're like, can that really work? I'm like, well, let's find out.
Chinese lanterns.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Chinese wishing lanterns, right? So I got some of those things off some random internet site. So, questionable. And I took these out to the parking lot, and I'm fully prepared for these not to work, right? So we put the first one, we light it, get it all set up, and of course it burns on the pad. Flames, bursts everywhere, it just falls apart. And she's like, well, that didn't work. I'm like, no, but let's try one more. So the next one, I'm like, I think I didn't expand the bottom quite enough, so we took a little more care, got it going, lit the thing. It just flew off. It just kept going up and up and up and up. And it just flew up.
Did you hear faraway sirens afterwards? And you were just like, we gotta run.
Gotta get out of here.
My daughter's like,
this never happened.
Dad, I think we just lost this. We may have, we may start a fire someplace. But she goes, but on the plus side, I don't think there's any witnesses. So I'm like, no one's seeing it.
Burn up, Dad.
So, yes, it was awesome. So, actually, the good news was that the fire clearly went out when it was about, 5,000 feet in the air. I don't know how high it was. It was pretty high, though. And so I think it landed safely someplace quietly. So if you find my lantern and you're in the southern Nashua area, please send it back. So that was fun. Also, another fun thing, we discovered this show on Netflix called Brain Games. Have you seen this show? So it's like all the things you hear about with brain teasers. They go through and they kind of explain. It's sort of an educational show. It was originally aired on National Geographic and now it's on Netflix. But it goes through and does all these little optical illusion tricks and other deceptions that freak your brain out. And it kind of explains how your brain works at the same time. It's really fascinating. My girls love it. And it's a fun show to watch together. It does have a lot of game in it as well. A lot of you can learn a lot about gaming science in the show also, and the science of why things are enjoyable to do. It's a really interesting show. If you like that sort of how things work, but also it's really into how your brain works and how you can trick your brain. Really interesting show. So if you like that sort of stuff, Brain Games is pretty cool. And then in my final achievement, I finished Horizon Zero Dawn on the PS4. That was a lot of fun. Highly recommend that game. If you like sort of post-apocalyptic sci-fi, open world, sort of Assassin's Creed feely kind of game, Horizon Zero Dawn is great. A lot of fun with that thing. Plus, you're hunting and riding giant robots, so how can that be bad?
Where's the downside on that?
There is no downside. That's the best part.
No.
So I think
the downside is you have to own a next gen console.
You do have to own a
that.
next gen. That is the downside. Yes, you do have to own a PS4. So, but yeah, so it was a lot of fun. So anyway, so is that achievements, gentlemen? I think we got a lot in there. Is that it?
That is achievements.
Excellent.
Sounds like it.
In a world where board gaming was king, in a time when Kickstarter ruled the web, when every day brought more and more games, now, more than ever, two men, and a revolving third chair, and a girl, a total fangirl, brought a shining light into the darkness so that all mankind would know what to buy. They are the D6 generation.
Hey, and now it's time to talk about our friends at BattleFoam.com.
At BattleFoam?
You know, I just love me my BattleFoam, Craig. Craig, what are you currently rocking as your favorite BattleFoam bag right now?
I actually have the Outlaw bag from Wild West Exodus. Yes. It's a perfect size for all these skirmish games that I've been getting into lately. But I've got because I have so many similar sized bags, I have a bunch of different tray layouts, and so I've got my Marvel guys are in one tray, and I have all my Star Wars guys are now in another tray, and all my Guild Ball guys are now in another tray, and I can kind of swap them out, and I have a larger piece of foam underneath that has some terrain in it, and my cool scoreboard that I built for Guild Ball. So that always stays with me. So it's a really cool, versatile setup that I got there.
It is awesome, and I have I love the customized foam specific for your favorite game system. So I think I've spoken on the show recently that my daughter just finished her Gargantuan, and I just finished my War Wagon, and these are giant models. And how do you get them around? And no worries, because BattleFoam has specifically cut pieces exactly for these models. I ordered them up. They got shipped to me quickly and easily. My daughter and I popped them into our bags. Off to the gaming store we go. And no worries. I got mine to Adepticon and back. Not a problem. Fantastic. Easy to get in there. Easy to carry around. And they look snappy, too. They even add little logos into the piece. So you get your faction logo in the corner, maybe the name of the model right there on the top of the bit. So you know, you can see with pride, behold my Gargantuan as it comes out of my pod. Pod of awesome.
Whoa.
Exactly. So, and the other thing to remember about BattleFoam, too, is they have a lot of different choices here. They've got hard cases, super high-end cases you can run over with a truck and not damage your models, but they've also got very affordable, soft-sided cases and everything in between.
That's right.
So
and they've even got the cardboard for storage with all the trays that you've got.
Why not build a system where you take the trays out, put them away when you're not carrying them around, when your favorite game of the month is in there in your bag, and then you switch it out every month, whatever your game wants to be. Just buy one bag and a few cardboard boxes, and you're good to go. So if you need it for transport, they've got it at BattleFoam.com.
Hooah!
And now, in an attempt to bring a small amount of dignity and decorum to this otherwise base form of entertainment, and I use the term loosely, I am proud to present...
Oh, get on with it. It's time for App of the Ep.
Seriously, Wakeland? I used to have my own segment, now I'm relegating to announcing this pap.
Hey, you're lucky we still use you. Hey, and welcome to another App of the Ep. This time around, I want to talk about a brand new, I guess you call them point-and-click adventures still, I suppose, Thimbleweed Park. So this game is definitely a tribute, an homage, if you will, to the classic sort of point-and-click adventures from the late 80s, early 90s, right? So games like Secret of Monkey Island and the Sierra Online, King's Quest, and Space Quest series, those kinds of games. Now, these, my understanding is some of the developers who worked on Monkey Island are back on this one, and you can definitely tell it's got the retro graphics going on there, so they definitely designed it like it was built in 1992. However, and it takes place in that time period. However, it was a recent release, just came out the end of last month. It is a lot of fun. What's really unique about it is you get to play different characters. So unlike some of the original point-and-click adventures where you play single person. In this game, you pop around from different perspectives of individuals throughout the game. And it takes place in this very small town called Thimbleweed Park. And there's a murder mystery happening there. And you primarily also flip back and forth between these two investigators who are trying to figure out what happened. But they're also there with ulterior motives, which you know right from the very beginning and not really even sure what either are looking into. But then as you meet other characters in towns through flashbacks that are playable, you get to dive in and understand these characters as well. So really interesting game. It's very much a classic point and click and, find things and figure out little mysteries and puzzles as you go. But the dialogue is great. The voice acting is fantastic. It is full of the irreverent sort of humor that has been made famous by games like Monkey Island. So if you are a fan of those games, or if you've never experienced them before, definitely check it out. And another little bonus for this game, I've been playing it while I'm traveling, and I'm playing it on my Microsoft Surface. And the problem with gaming on the Surface when you're on an airplane is that games generally eat the battery up. So I generally get, 4 or 5 good hours out of my Surface when I'm doing work, which is great. But I want to relax on a plane and actually just try something. If I'm playing a pretty heavy game, any kind of game with 3D graphics or anything, or even a game like, Civilization, that can burn through the battery pretty quick. I can get maybe an hour and a half out of it. So on a long flight across the country, that can be challenging. However, Thimbleweed Park, because it is this retro-style graphics, it uses very, very minimal battery. It's not really stressing the computer at all, and you get a lot of battery life out of it. So I found I got 4 or 5 good hours playing this game on the plane, and the game's going to take a lot more than that to solve. There's a lot of content here, a lot to do, so definitely check it out. Thimbleweed Park on Steam today. Thank you for listening to another scintillating edition of App of the App, a segment in which, hey, less of that, more just getting on with the show. Seriously, Wakeland, you are like school in summer. No class.
Hey, welcome back. And so we've talked a little bit about Ash and where he's coming from and Guerrilla Miniatures Games and stuff, but we thought this is going to make an awesome segment because you guys are impressed with how much we play, but we're impressed with how much Ash plays.
Oh, it's not even close. It's ridiculous.
It's actually ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
And so, shucks. Don't even shucks. No false modesty here. It's all on public record.
It is, exactly.
True. So we want to establish for our listeners, who is this Ash guy? Who is this crazy Canadian? And we've already got a stable of crazy Canadians who come on the show regularly. So you're in good company. But
who?
Terrace, are you familiar with Terrace Cassidy from Geek Nation Tours?
Yes, I am actually. We're corresponding right now about going on a tour to England.
There you go. See, excellent choice.
Awesome
I might be on a tour. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that was. He's probably the king of the Canadians as far as the ones that come on the show.
Well, watch it. Rodney's been with us once from Watch It Play.
I didn't say he was the only.
He's
one.
Another monarch, a Canadian monarch in gaming. Number two. Number two. We got to be careful because those Canadians, they're easily offended up there.
There could be like
exactly.
The warden, but then there's lots of different lords.
It's like it's kind of like the geese. They migrate down from time to time. You visit us and then you go back up north. It's sort of a thing.
That's right.
I have a funny story about that. There's actually like millions of Canadian geese in the UK, and they're just miserable. They just beat up all the swans, and like they're like these huge bullies, and they're
like little gangs, like little hit gangs.
I walk around, I'm just like, I'm so proud of you guys. You do God's work. Great.
You're doing God's work. Beat up those ducks.
Slowly spreading the Canadian influence across the world, like one feather at a time.
Yeah, pooping on everything and being miserable and stealing sandwiches.
Stealing sandwiches. They're like the pigeons of the geese world.
They're like pirates, man.
Pigeons of the geese world doesn't really make a lot of sense.
We're working on it.
But anyway, so enough of this. This is the dithering we don't need. We need some serious time with Ash talking about what he really does. So Ash, we start when we have a new guest host on the show. We start in the same place all the time. And that would be this grammatically questionable question. Are you now or have you ever been a gamer?
I would say I'm definitely I can fall in that category about gamer. Yes. Do you want to expand on that?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So what games got you into it?
We're looking for your origin story.
Yeah. How did you get into gaming?
First get into gaming? When did you get, what era did you enter gamerhood?
Right. So this is like my origin story.
Exactly.
That you need to go back to the winter of like 1987 or 1988.
Nice, a good year. Good year.
This is a good year, yeah. And I had something bad in school, and this is the 80s, right? So like, I mean, there was no real like regulation of what teachers couldn't do to you. So I was sentenced to sit next to the flagpole at recess in like the dead of Canadian winter, and do nothing. So like I had a month basically like this like little mini suspension where I had to sit in the cold, in the freezing cold on the ground next to a flagpole.
Wow.
And
I'm intrigued how this ends up with gaming.
It does. Well, it does. So in the library at that school, and there's actually a meme going around right now. It's really funny. And the meme is, I've spent the rest of my life chasing the high of a childhood scholastic book fair. But we had all these scholastic book fairs at that school. And if you were a kid in the 80s, one of the things that was always at scholastic book fairs were these books with these sort of lime green spines. And they have these choose your own adventure books called Fighting Fantasy.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're talking about an era, the Atari 2600 was out. Video games had sort of started to move out of the arcade into the home. But this was the video games for an adolescent kid of that generation, was these choose your own adventure books. And short story long, I mean, I'm not going to go too far into it because the history is sort of all over the internet if you want to research it and look it up. But those two guys, Ian Livingston and Steve Jackson, are the founders of Games Workshop. Mm-hmm. And so in the back of those books, I saw an ad for Citadel Miniatures. And then there was like a local comic book store. And I would find these books at the book fair and in our school library, and I would take them out and sit by the flagpole and read them. And so instead of like getting to play at recess, I would, have my 2 dice, pencil, and eraser, and I'd go on a little adventure. And that's how I found about miniature wargaming. Was there was a Citadel Miniatures ad recommending, if you want figurines for your hero or you want figurines to play games with, check it out. And this is a time where there's no real game stores. There's comic book stores. Right. Like this is pre-Magic, right? So the game store hadn't really become a thing yet. There was, D&D books being sold. And this one comic book store that was local to me called The Book Between, and it had some miniatures in it. And I saw that logo again. I saw the little tower logo. And I picked some up, and that's sort of like the rest is history. It's almost been 30 years. I think this is my 29th year.
That's awesome.
Miniature wargaming now.
So were miniature wargaming your first sort of gamery games, or did you ever dabble in, any role-playing games or board games or any of that thing, or did you go straight to miniatures, just hardcore, main line right off the bat?
The miniatures kind of took me to that other stuff. So, for instance, the Fighting Fantasy novels actually had some RPGs. Mm-hmm. There was Fighting Fantasy, which was an RPG book that they'd written, and there was the Riddling Reaver, which was almost like a campaign setting, and then there was Advanced Fighting Fantasy and stuff like that. And that kind of introduced me to what RPGs were. And I mean, if you were a kid growing up in that time, you read the only fantasy novels you read almost were published by TSR. So it was almost inevitable that you came into contact with Dungeons and Dragons. Mm-hmm. And I owned lots of Dungeons and Dragons books, but I actually owned them as background books for the novel series I was reading. Oh, so cool. I owned weird ones too, because I wasn't super into the Forgotten Realms stuff, like the main sort of D&D campaign or the Greyhawk stuff. Yeah. I was into the weird stuff like Dark Sun.
Oh God! Okay.
Yeah. I love the Braum art that was all over it. And I bought some of the Dragonlance stuff. Although going back and rereading the Dragonlance books, they're just awful.
They don't really stand up. Yeah,
they do not stand up. No, they don't.
And then so that's why I kind of collected some D&D books along the way. And I never got to play D&D. I never really got to do any RPG stuff, even up till now. And it's something actually that Owen always bugs me about, is saying that I should try D&D. But all my RPG experiences were owning the books, sort of for other reasons, and then the video games that came along, spawned out by the things like the Fighting Fantasy books. It's funny, there's actually a great 25th anniversary edition of the first Fighting Fantasy book called The Warlock of Firetop Mountain, and it has a history in it, like a whole subsection of history, which is almost like the proto-history of Games Workshop, and also weirdly the proto-history of Eidos. Because when he sold off his portion of Games Workshop in 1991, Ian Livingston became one of the biggest video game designers in the UK, and he still is. He's still the owner of Eidos, which is, it's now Square Eidos, right? Which is made Eidos made Tomb Raider and a million big games back in the day.
Yep, that's awesome. So really was miniature gaming. It was the Make Your Own Adventure books, which I was also a huge fan of. Those are awesome.
Wow, who wasn't?
And then you got into miniatures. pretty early on, which is fantastic. Do you still have some of the first miniatures you painted?
I do, actually. It's funny. I kept around some of the RTB01 Marines that I owned because they were some of the first like 40K miniatures I ever bought. Mm-hmm. But probably my first miniatures there was this. This is before GW plastic clam packs, where it was like a cardboard backing and then a clam pack plastic sheet over top.
Right.
There was these hard plastic boxes, and they actually had a slider in the back. Remember those?
Yeah, I remember those.
And my first ever miniature box was a box of they weren't even called Empire Knights; they were called Imperial Knights, and they were metal knights with plastic horses. And I think they were from probably the C Series catalog of GW. And they came with like a wizard, a champion with a hammer, like a griffin helmet, and there was like 3 or 4 knights. They look like kind of like the Reichsguard knights do now. And I still have like all of them. They're probably covered in like a half inch of like Tester's enamel because like, I didn't know what I was doing. You know,
that's where we all start.
Like, that's how you start.
Everybody, yeah.
I think I think the Tester sells more paints to beginning miniatures painters than to model painters. That's my theory. Because we've all got collections slathered with Tester's paint.
Well, it's because it's all we could find. Like water-based acrylic paint, you couldn't find, right? And so that's a funny story too. Is when I finally discovered Citadel paints, I was so in love with them that like my mom every year would get me a bunch of Citadel paint colors I didn't own, and she would put them in my Christmas cracker. So like the Christmas cracker, like you like pop the thing and it would snap and stuff inside. She'd make her own. And like they would always have Citadel paints in them, and it was always like weird color. And I still have because like those original Citadel paints from the 80s and the 90s,
they lasted forever.
Last forever,
and they never dried out. I know
screw lids, the pre-screw lid ones, like the foil covered ones.
Yep.
I still have like titillating pink and like battle green, and salamander black, and like all of these like weird colors that like glistening green, amethyst purple. Like the metallic, remember the colored metallics, like stuff like that.
Oh, those were awesome. It's hard to make those up on your own now.
Yeah.
Well, now you've got shades. You don't have to make your own washes anymore, like we used to like do with like dish detergent and floor wax.
Now, Ash, so you started with the miniatures game. What miniatures like rule set did you start with? What's the one that you first really got into?
So the first like actual rule book for a miniature game I owned was Rogue Trader. So I had the Rogue Trader rulebook, and I still have the first one. Actually, I probably have like 6 or 7 copies of Rogue Trader now, but I still have the first softcover copy of Rogue Trader. And I actually just went and picked up the new printing, the hardcover printing, the restored one.
Oh yeah,
that they made. Yeah, I actually had a friend go and get me one from Warhammer World when they launched it because I just wanted to have another. I wanted to have like a play copy. Yeah, because like one of my things I do on my channel is I do a segment on Thursdays called Throwback Thursday, and I really think it would be neat to. I want to get like I saw this thing online once called Kids Play Old Video Games, and it's like blowing the minds of like 12-year-olds about how hard video games used to be.
Right.
And I want to get like 2 like 19 to 20 something 40K players
try to read
bring them in and like teach them to play Rogue Trader.
Nice.
And be like, I'm your game master, and just like watch their brains melt and have like
now roll for the equipment on your Chaos Marines. Go roll.
Exactly, yeah. And be like amble attack, like just like random stuff would happen. Like, we have to generate the plot and the subplot. A Tyrannosaurus is like eating the transponder for your spaceship, and just like watch them just be like, what are we doing right now? Like, what is this?
This is Warhammer 40,000.
Because I think it would just be comedy. Like I think it'd be amazing. Well, it's funny because it's. I'm actually in the process of editing a video. It's a bit about this right now. Is the sort of like the origin of where miniature wargaming started, where it's all about. It's a progression off of role playing games to now, where it's feeding off of esports, right? And it's two very different paths, and there's like generational clashes happening right now in the industry, which is kind of interesting.
Right. I think it's pretty insightful because I remember when our show started, we started talking about this idea that, the difference in culture between Privateer Press and Games Workshop, and how Privateer was really Matt Wilson will tell you, he was very informed by the video game industry and how video games work, is how War Machine was designed, right? The hyper-competitive sort of mode. Whereas you're absolutely right, Games Workshop entirely came from the RPG background, right? I mean, Rogue Trader was entirely
building
RPG.
a story.
Yeah, it was
Chainmail too. Even like Chainmail was a mass combat mod for D&D.
Oh, sure.
Exactly. Done at the Lake Geneva
Wargaming
or miniatures or something convention, historical convention, whatever it was.
Yep. So were you able to preserve your passion for miniature gaming right from the late 80s through now, or did you kind of wane and come back, or how did
I think everybody goes through stages in any hobby, any interest in hobby they have. Yeah. So like, you know, like I got to high school and I took up like skateboarding and girls and, you know, like beer, and like you discover all the things that you discover like when you're you're an adolescent, and your priorities sort of shift. But I never, like, all through university, I still had a white door subscription. That was it's funny because my parents were one of the things my parents were very like proactive about was reading. Mm-hmm. And so it didn't matter what it was. If it was a book or if it was like written material, they would just get it for me. Like they just always say yes. And that's something I'm trying to do with my kids too. Like they want something to read, they can just have it.
Yeah, we have the same rule. Your allowance doesn't go to, you want a book, you get it. Books are free.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't even care. Like if you just
doesn't matter what it is, books are free.
Like whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And so I had a white dwarf subscription probably from the time I was 12 or 13. Yep. Because I didn't even know what it was until probably then. Up until I left Games Workshop, really, like, and that was in 2014. And so I was always connected with the hobby, even if I wasn't connected with the hobby. So like, it's like even stuff like when I was a teenager, I spent all my summers. My dad's a mining engineer. I spent all my summers working in mining camps in like the tundra. Or like crazy far places. Well,
I don't want to say it sounds impressive, but you spend your summers working in mining camps, like in the tundra,
and your winters hugging a flagpole.
All right, it just sounds like a really oppressive childhood. I don't know what happens in Canada, but it sounds a little rough. I'm not gonna lie.
Hardcore, man.
Well, in the early '90s, it was the big diamond rush, the big Canadian diamond rush. My dad was part of that.
Yeah.
Up in the Northwest Territories, and so I was working in like exploration camps and stuff, doing just like grunt work, just like tilling samples and working in a slime shack and stuff. But the thing my parents would always send me is my copy of White Dwarf. So like even then, like and those copies of White Dwarf were probably some of the most thumbed through, like read cover to cover, I remember one of them was when second edition Space Hulk came out. Because that'd be like the mid 90s. Mm-hmm. And it was like there was 2 or 3 issues in a row that were all just like extra missions and stuff and like battle reports for Space Hulk. And I probably read them like 100 times. Because Space Hulk was my jam. Like it was one of the first games I ever played after playing Rogue Trader. Mm-hmm. Actually, I probably played Space Hulk, like literally physically played Space Hulk before I even played 40K. I owned 40K armies because like that's back in the time where like you felt like lucky to meet someone that even knew what this stuff was.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yep.
It was like a blue moon. Like you're going in and buying this stuff from the comic book store. The comic book owner's like, what? Who is it? What? You even feel like an outcast there. Right. Yeah, like it's not like today we go to a gaming store and like you kind of like you're with your people,
right?
Like there was no people. Like it was like two or three people you might meet in like 10 years,
right?
That knew what that stuff was, and so like it came and went, and then of course I got a job at Games Workshop just for like beer money when I was in university, so part-time job, and that was when I kind of got back into it, sort of like. I guess actively, being like, oh, cool, I'm going to build a new contemporary army. I'm actually going to play with the collection I've had for like 10, 15 years.
That's awesome. Very cool.
So Games Workshop, and then working at Games Workshop, you pretty much have to learn all the games from Games Workshop. So of those, what was your favorite sort of weird, like in most Games Workshops when I worked there, like everybody kind of gravitated towards one system, and that was everybody had to be able to teach everything, but you sort of kind of husbanded one in particular. Did you have one of the Games Workshop games that was kind of like your main focus?
Not really, because I've always been driven by like what I'm currently excited about. So like it was usually models driving my interest in games. So like if a really cool model line came out for an army, it didn't matter what game that was for. I would start collecting that army and be really excited about that game. And so it was always for me. People always ask like, what kind of gamer are you? I used to actually teach courses about like there was a really old White Dwarf article that Jervis wrote called The Hobby Pie, which is actually one of my like touchstone things I think he's ever done, which he used to use in the design studio. Mm-hmm. And it's about like where do your interests lie in the hobby, and everybody's got like just a different pie chart. Like some people are driven by the gaming experience, some people it's camaraderie, some people it's painting, some people it's just collecting, just having all the things, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was always the sort of like the imagery and story, and then like the building and painting and the collecting stuff. So like I could never play a game until everything was done. I think maybe because of when I came up in the hobby, like the only things I had to go by were pictures from magazines.
Right.
So in a picture from a magazine, you never see people playing with unpainted miniatures.
Right. Yeah.
on a folding table. You know what I mean? Like, it's always this beautifully appointed table with these beautifully painted armies. And so, like, until I was like probably 16 or 17 and walked into a gaming store where I saw people playing like that, I didn't think you were allowed to play with unpainted miniatures.
Right.
I was like, it would be so taboo to me and so strange. And when I first saw some people doing the gaming store, I was like, what is wrong with these people? Don't they know they're doing it wrong?
Why didn't you just play chess?
Yeah, like what's the point of doing this if you're not? And it was very like eye-opening for me that people cared about it a different way. And so like I don't think I really gravitated to one system. I just sort of like I followed my heart. You know, I'm a romantic. Yeah. Like when I play a game, I can hear the horns blowing. You know what I mean? I can sort of like I can hear the drums pounding as the armies march to battle, and that's it's the immersion for me. It's sort of like the experience that I want to have.
So you've
been eclectic from the very beginning.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
Yeah, well, I think it comes from doing it by yourself for so long.
Right? Yeah.
You know, like 25. There's no internet. Right. You know, it's funny because people talk about how. Oh, White Dwarf changed. Oh, White Dwarf isn't as good as it used to be. Oh, White Dwarf's not, you know, this or that. You know, you'd always hear that in Games Workshop stores. I'm sure when you work for Workshop, you heard that too. So I've got like empirical evidence that like, you know, the pre-100 White Dwarfs were even more full of advertising than White Dwarf today. Like you're talking about, you know, there's ads for Amiga computers in them.
Oh, right.
There's ads for like, seriously, there's ads for Zorg. Remember those like those crazy old text-based RPGs? Like, because this is before like Games Workshop had their management buyout, and they're just a retailer selling like everything, Risk, D&D, you know, like a million different things. And so, you know, it's sort of like there's two things. There's the time before the internet where the only way that you have to feel connected to the thing that you're interested in is this print material. And then there's the time after the internet where, you know, all print material, all magazines, doesn't matter what it is, they die this death because you have instant updated access to your interest all the time.
Right.
No magazine is ever going to be as good as being able to go into a forum or social media now and have, you know, a constant connection to this community, these other people that share your interest.
Right.
Well, exactly. And so back when it's just White Dwarf, the only way you have to feel connected to the thing that you like is this little print magazine. And people are going to, you know, people would say, you know, White Dwarf's not as good as it used to be, but what they're really saying is I miss being 17.
Right. Exactly. I miss that being my connection to the hobby, because now your connection to the hobby, as you mentioned, is a lot more intimate through a lot of things. It was, you know, in the late 90s, it was the internet, but, you know, and websites. But now it's things like, I'm going for a segue here, Craig. Wait for it. But now it's things like podcasts and video podcasts, right? Because now you get interactivity in different ways. It's like playing the game without playing the game almost, right? A lot more, you know, imagine if you were up at that mining site with your cell phone watching streaming video of your favorite game being played. I think it would have been even more engaging for you, assuming you get a good cell connection. You know?
And that's actually my theory. Right. Because it's funny, because I actually had this conversation with people back in 2014 when I actually discovered this. Because I'll be honest, I don't watch videos on YouTube or listen to podcasts. Like I had no real idea that this was as big as it was before 2014.
Right.
Like I didn't realize this was a thing. And there's a really simple reason for that, is because I was just doing the hobby all the time.
Right.
I had people around me that I knew that I could go on hobby with. And so I didn't need this like other outlet to find people that were interested in the same thing as me. I was working with people that were interested in the same things. I was always playing games.
Right. So I think it's a good segue. Now, but before you get in, because I really want to ask you how you got into the idea of doing, you know, the streaming of your games, because I think, well, you know, a lot of folks are aware of you. A lot of our listeners may not be yet. So it's a great story. But when did you branch out into other miniature gaming? Did that just happen organically, or because you decided to start streaming games, you decided to broaden beyond Games Workshop products?
Well, kind of always. I mean, it's funny because there were other miniature games before, I would say, like 1999, but the vast majority of them were historical.
Right. That's right.
And there was other miniature lines too, but the vast majority of them were based on other IPs, and they weren't intended for gaming purposes. There were things like the Mithril line of Lord of the Rings miniatures,
right.
The Ral Partha line for D&D. They're primarily geared towards not miniature wargaming unless they're historical. And so there wasn't really a lot of options. I mean, until the late 90s, there weren't a ton. I mean, until 1996, really, when Rackham comes around,
right,
there wasn't really a company that was even trying to be a company. You know, it was trying to be more than like a few guys in a basement with a spin caster and an interest in sculpting.
Right.
And it really is Rackham in 1996 that makes it kind of like proven that someone else could do this that isn't Games Workshop. Until then, they were relatively uncontested. Like you had Heartbreaker with Warzone, and they blew up, right? Like you had FASA and BattleTech, you know what I mean? But they never really got the same exposure or even the same sort of like up and running as
never had the range. I think
did.
it's the miniatures. GW always, because they were in it so early, they got the look and the range down, and it wasn't really until, like you said, the late 90s, early 2000s that anyone came close to thinking about capturing the magic that GW had figured out, right?
Well, and then it was the internet that I think gave them that ability, because every company looks the same size from their website.
Right.
You can't tell if there's 9,000 people working there or if there's 25 people working there.
Right.
I mean, that's the illusion of privateer press. Like there's probably under 100 people working there for that whole company, you know, full time, maybe half that aren't contractors and stuff. But they look the same size almost as Games Workshop, you know, from like their model line, from the number of codes they have and the SKUs and their board games and stuff. You know, but you got Games Workshop who, if you took every other miniature company on Earth and put their staff together, probably would still have more employees than everyone else combined, right? Yeah. Like, and I think there's almost 1,000 people right now just working at Nottingham.
Right.
You know, like that's, and then you've got every retail chain and all of this thing all over the world. So it's a huge, you know, it's a huge differential. But if you just look at the website, you'd have no idea. If you're mom and dad, you know what I mean, and you're going, maybe I'll go and research miniature wargaming and see what Timmy should play and what the best company and best game is. Like, from looking at the website, you're not going to have any clue. Like, you're not going to know which one's biggest, which one's going to have the longevity, which ones are probably traded, which ones aren't. Like, and so the internet, I think in the 90s, people understanding the internet, understanding sort of like the illusions that it could project, allowed companies to start to present themselves, you know what I mean, as full companies. I think that's where my interest kicked off, because I own lots of historical miniatures, because I had played historical games. I had an uncle who was very into World War II history, and so I'd buy model kits, and we never really talked about it, but like it just, that being around that like rubbed off on me, and so I owned some World War II stuff. I owned a lot of like ancients and stuff too, and then sort of like this like, oh, you know, the biggest barrier to me thinking maybe I should try another miniature game is usually who am I going to play it with? Right. But the internet comes along and you can actually find people now playing these other miniature games because they can see each other playing them online. Right. Like, you know, you see people posting pictures on a forum of the confrontation miniatures they're painting. Oh, that guy lives in the same city as me. I'm actually going to go and invest dollars in this now because it's something I might actually do. And so, yeah, so I guess I was like an early adopter, and all through my career at GW, just in my, maybe it's before DW that I kind of like learned this lesson, but I always knew I needed to keep a hobby and a job. And so I always played other miniature games and like my historical games and stuff alongside playing GW games, because I needed something to go home to that wasn't work.
Right. Well, that's a good one.
Yeah, I love painting miniatures, but like I can't go home and crank out miniatures I've been looking at all day. Right. You know, like, I want to go home and actually be excited to do something that I didn't have the chance to do that day, and think about something that I didn't have a chance to think about. And so, I mean, the sort of like, I guess, dovetailing back to what I do now, the vast majority of the games that, you know, are in the sort of like the throwback stuff that I do, I've already got painted armies for. Like, that's awesome. There's tons of, I have a back catalog of painted miniatures that I've lugged between several countries that is pretty deep.
So how many armies for different games do you have? Just real quick before we get into, I just got to know, how big's the back catalog there?
I have no idea. I mean,
uncountable.
I think an easier thing would me to do is if you guys were just to rattle off miniature company names until I said I don't play that one.
Okay, so pretty much all of them.
Like,
so you play?
I can't parse it.
So
I mean, I can tell you some. I can tell you some off the top of my head that I don't play.
Yeah.
And don't own armies for, and it's usually stuff that I tried and probably gotten rid of stuff for, and that would be things like BattleTech. Like I never got into BattleTech.
Okay.
And it was always the models.
Yep.
Yeah, they're ugly.
But pretty much, and you said you weren't a big historical guy. So pretty much if it's fantasy or sci-fi, you've played it or probably still own an army for it.
Probably, yeah.
Awesome. So
yeah.
So we could talk about the history of miniature gaming forever because it sounds like we all grew up at the same time. So we could, but I really want to get into your awesome channel that Craig discovered. Was like, Russ, you got to watch this. It's amazing, and it is. I can't believe the amount of stuff you obviously play, and then how much volume you put on the internet of such high quality. It really blows me away.
And if you haven't found Guerrilla Miniature Games,
you got to check it out.
The channel yet, you've got to check it out because almost any game you're interested in is going to be there somewhere.
Well, the thing is, audio is hard enough, and Craig and I have talked many times about why we would never do video because it's just too much work. And the fact that you crank out so much video is amazing. So, when did you wake up and decide? You know what I need to do in my life? I need to spend every non-working hour playing, recording video, recording myself playing miniature games. When did that sort of become a passion for you?
Well, totally by accident. I mean, so I worked for a workshop until the spring of 2014, and I came back to Canada. So I just had my first child. My daughter was born in fall of 2013.
Oh, congratulations!
And she's about 5 months old.
There you go.
And when I came back, she's 3 now. She's gonna go to school this fall. But in 2014, we moved back to St. Catharines, and the reason for that was she's born in the U.S., so she's born in Memphis, and she didn't have a passport.
Oh.
And so we had to do a land crossing. And luckily enough, my wife and her family are from the Niagara region in Canada, which is just across the border from Buffalo. So we put her nursery, 2 cats, my wife, and me into like a U-Haul trailer and my Tiguan and drove from Memphis to Buffalo, basically, across the border here. And because you can just do it with like birth certificate when you cross in. And so we just ended up in the Niagara region kind of just sort of like logically after we left because my work permit was up in the U.S. and I was having and hawing about what I was going to do with my life. And I decided that I'd been traveling a lot, about 36 weeks a year. And having just had my first kid, I was like, let's just go home. And so we went home. We ended up in this region. And so we're setting down roots. We got ourselves sort of like accommodated and settled. We sold our 2 properties in the U.S. And sort of building like a home here. And I was just painting miniatures as I do, in my downtime and stuff, watching the girl. My wife's a licensed denturist, so she does like it's a job in a few places in the States, but she wasn't able to practice because in most states the dentist lobby keeps it from being a job. It's basically prosthetics for the mouth, so partial and full dentures, implants, like stuff like that. But so she couldn't do it when we were in the States. So we kind of just flip-flopped, and she went to work, and I made sure that the girl didn't, starve to death and freeze to death in the dark. And I was just looking for something to do. And so I went on Facebook, social media, and searched for Infinity in Niagara. Because I was painting Infinity models at the time. I had a whole bunch of them I hadn't painted, and it was just something that was different to throw paint onto. And I found a post by Matthew at Mini Wargaming looking for Infinity players on Facebook. And so I didn't know who this was. And I just emailed him and said, hey, I play Infinity. I want to play Infinity. And he invited me up for a game. And that's where I discovered the studio that they had and what they were. And he walked me through what it actually was and that we were going to record our game. And I was just like, what is this? And it's funny because actually conversations with him are where I came up with that whole like, oh, this is what White Dwarf is now. Like, this is what I see what you guys are doing here. You're the guy who doesn't know anyone who plays miniature war games that lives somewhere Wyoming is probably getting all of his hobby fix through you guys. And we actually had a talk once about that. How I'd be betting dollars to donuts that in 10 years that guy's version of like a Andy Chambers or a Jake Thornton or whatever is going to be like a Matthew Glanfield, or a Steve from Mini Wargaming. Because they're the hobby heroes now. They're the guys that you go and hang out with, air quotes, online to see, to feel like you're connected to the hobby and to watch a game. You're virtually walking into your local gaming store to get some painting advice from Chris at Mini Wargaming. And that's where I kind of learned about it. And so I was there for about 8 months, and then my wife, we had our second child, and my wife has been actually like practicing again. And so when I left Mini Wargaming, I did a little crowdfund for a camera because I had fun doing it. Like, it wasn't really something I intended to do for a career. Like, it was never something that I was like, oh, I should try this. Because even at that point, having like recorded like 200 or 300 games for them, I'd absorbed like the technical side of it. That was easy. But I still wasn't like, it used the typical paywall internet site. Like, that's a lot of work to try and make it your 9 to 5.
Right.
But I had fun doing it. So I put a crowdfund up and I said, hey, I'd like to buy a camera. Maybe I'll keep recording games. And I think I asked for like $2,500. I was like, I wanted to get the same camera that I had in Wargaming.
Right.
Which is about $2,500 Canadian, roughly. And I put it up, and it was an Indiegogo. And it wasn't really any cool prizes or anything. It was just, me being like, hey, here's my hat. Give us a go. If you like what I did, I'll keep doing it. And like in the first 7 hours, I had like $9,000.
Wow, nice.
I was sitting there like spooning food into my daughter and like sweating and being like, what am I gonna do? Like, what is this?
What's happening?
And then like my inbox was blowing up on my Facebook page, being like, what are you gonna do now? Oh my god, like what are you gonna do? You have all this money. And so I had to just like shut off my laptop for like 24 hours and walk away and be like, what am I gonna do? And so I had to go and like rewrite the whole Indiegogo and be like, well, I guess now I'm gonna go and get a studio. And I just wrote a bunch of stretch goals and I just did the math and got on Craigslist and started figuring out what local like studio space I could find that I could build something into, and then tried to decide like how am I actually going to do it. And I'd actually heard of there was a brand new platform coming out at the time, and it's super well known now. But when I did it for the first time, it was almost completely brand new. It was probably about a year old. Mm-hmm. Called Patreon.
Yep.
And I think everybody has a Patreon now, but when I first did it, it was mostly being used by comic book artists and like all kinds of weird, sort of like project funding stuff. And I thought, well, I don't really know about building websites. And I don't really know about anything else, but I know about making miniatures, and I know about running artist co-ops, because I've actually been part of artist co-ops when I was at OCAD in Toronto.
Right.
So I'll just do this as an artist co-op, and we'll find a space. I'll sublet to other people that want to make content, and I'll make content, and I can stay home and watch the kids and have a revenue stream, and people seem to like it and want me to do it. And so it was sort of like I don't say I got pushed into it, but it was made. It was almost like a by demand thing. Mm-hmm. People just said like, you should just keep doing this. Like, and here's all the means to do it. And then I didn't. All I had was the money from Indiegogo, and I put the Patreon up, and it just blew up too. Great. And I was like, okay, I guess they mean it. Like, because you never really think like you have all these like self doubts, like, oh yeah, this is work. Like,
no one's gonna watch.
There's no way I can make a job out of this.
Right.
But it just in the last 18 months, I've literally only been doing this like 18 months.
That's awesome though.
It'll be 2 years in June.
I think the energy, I'm really impressed by how quickly you got energy behind it and got momentum. How did you promote it? I mean, it sounds like, I don't know. How did you get the word out? Because it sounds like it just found you by accident.
I don't know how this happened. And people ask me all the time, like, well, how'd you do it? How can I do it? Like, I want to be successful like you are. And I'm just like, I was just me on the internet.
Right. That's great.
That's it. Like, that's awesome. The only thing I can say that I know for sure was like a conscious thing was just being really relentless. Like, you said, like, how do you make so much content? Well, you just grind out that much content. Like, I took the first month at the studio and I made a month's content before I released anything, so that I was always ahead.
Okay. Yep.
That's smart.
And so, because it's a treadmill, man, like, you have to have content. You have to have it on certain days. And then when you even publish a calendar, it means you have to have certain types of content too. Right. So, like, it can be pretty grueling. But I've got a background in business and infrastructure and logistics, right? So like, I just mathed it out, I what was that line from The Martian? I'm gonna have to science the heck out of this.
Science the hell out of this. Yeah, well, that's right. I think you nailed it, right? Because it is continuous content. It's regular publishing, and it's maintaining the quality.
It's doing the work.
It is work.
It is
because there are days you don't want to do it. No matter how fun it sounds, it's not.
Yeah. It can be points where you don't want to do it. And it's. I mean, we can talk later because you've got other. I know you have more questions about this kind of stuff, but like, there's ways of making it not feel so much like work. But there's aspects of like editing and stuff that are always just going to be.
Yeah.
Like when I'm done this call with you guys, I got to go back and edit video because there's a video that I got voiceovers for that like is coming up at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Like.
So it's a question of, if you always want to be behind and you always want to have work that you have to do next, have a channel.
Yeah, well, get into any kind of production. I mean, that's just production in general, right? That's warehousing. That's I think probably from a really early age, working in mining, where you've got to get things done by X time. Like the airplane is coming. It only has so much fuel. Everything has to be done. Like, you take a very like, farmer's hours approach to things.
Right.
Yeah.
And you just fit in the work where you can. There's a great fitness line, is the jogging only works if you do it.
Right.
And it does. It only works if you do it. You have to do it.
Yeah.
And so I have measures that I take to make sure that I'm always interested in what I'm doing and I'm enjoying what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Because I think the content's worthless when I'm not having a good time.
Right.
Well, especially
and I've seen content that is worthless because the people that are filming it aren't having a good time.
Oh yeah, and if you lose that energy, most people who lose the energy for podcasting or making videos or whatever, they're going to last a little bit longer than their energy did. So you get to see kind of how it goes towards the tail end, and it's not a pretty sight.
No, it's. I mean, and you should, and honestly, you should. I think that's just a life lesson for people. I mean, we're all pretty much from the same generation. We're all pretty old, so we know what our limits are. Mm-hmm. But this younger generation that's obsessed with social media and YouTubing, they might not have that kind of like rounded level of like self-awareness where they feel themselves hit a wall. Because I know when I hit a wall. Like I 100% know. Like, nope, gotta stop that. Like I'm in a wall right now with 40K. Like I can't. Like, and I'll be honest with that. Like I can't absorb 40K anymore. I love painting 40K armies. I love everything about the background for 40K. I love playing 30K right now because it's basically just 5th edition 40K. Uh-huh. But the level to which 40K has become an esport, like it's become League of Legends, is the closest analog I can put up, where you have to know everything about everything to play it with the majority of people. I'm too old, man. I don't want that level of intensity in my miniature war games.
I call myself a dabbler now. I've moved on to dabbler status. I am.
Well, I still collect miniatures. It's funny. Like, I mean, I think there's a level of recognition in that. I think you saw that with fantasy, 2-3 years ago. That the games can get too big, at some point after 30 years of fantasy, where the game remained for the vast majority of its lifespan the same game. Like it didn't change that much. And it's funny because I think that there's this big talk right now about how they're going to simplify 40K. You're going to make it simpler. And I'm like, didn't that happen in 1999?
Right. Doesn't it constantly happen?
I think we've simplified a couple of
the Age of Sigmaring of 40K happened in 3rd edition when they got rid of the movement values and all the save mods. Like
those are coming back now.
Second edition 40K. It took you like a weekend to play a game.
Yep. So what's the biggest, Ash? What's the biggest thing you've learned? I mean, it sounds like, thanks to starting this, when you had a lot of life experience, and so you did a hell of a lot of planning. It sounds like a lot of your planning really paid off. But what were some of the big lessons, 10 to 18 months in, that you're kind of like, whoa, I wish I'd done that a little differently when I launched, or if you corrected to make things just a little easier or better or whatever? What are the big
Well, you can definitely see it. You can definitely see it if you look at my release schedule from the very beginning for the first 6 months to now. I've loosened up how regularly I put out the same game. I don't do any game weekly at all. And this was something I knew about myself, and I think there's 2 reasons that's changed. In the beginning, I did do games that were almost weekly or bi-weekly. I still have some bi-weekly games because I really enjoy those games. But there's 2 problems with that. The first one is constantly finding people that want to play that game, and the second one is constantly playing that game.
Right.
Like, and I learned that lesson actually at Mini Wargaming in the beginning because I was just playing fantasy at like 5 days a week every week. Right. I love fantasy, but like you play 200 games of fantasy and you're just like, I can't look at my dwarf army anymore. I can't do this anymore. And I had those conversations with the guys that do content production there about making 40K games. Like you're playing the 700th 40K game. And it's like, I can't do this anymore. Like you're making the same thing over and over again, and you do hit that wall. And so I've kind of broken up my content schedule into, I make things based on what people coming in want to play. So very often I get emails from people saying, hey, I'd like to play a game. And they're like, I'm like, okay, great. Well, why do you want to play? I don't try and say we should play X or we should play Y. Right. And you can see the days of the week that I have on my schedule are very much, they're like buckets. This type of game falls into this day. Right. This type of game falls into this day. And I let the interest of the people that are coming in drive that. Because then they have a good time, which means I have a good time.
Well, what's cool about that too,
I don't really care what we play.
I think that's really smart. For one, so one, you're not putting the pressure on yourself to like, oh my God, I haven't had a 40K episode in like 2 months. So what am I going to do?
Exactly. Yeah.
But secondly,
and
your show is kind of a bellwether for what's hot, right? I mean, theoretically, right? What you're being asked to play is what people are really interested in right now. So you're kind of testing the market and responding to it, right?
Yep, absolutely. And it's good, I think, in that it lets me break up projects into dabs. Like when I first get started, I might have a big hump of things that I have to paint to get going. Like I'm doing like a Wrath of Kings project right now, and I have to get like the core level of Wrath of Kings models painted up to a patrol. But from there on, to get to the next level, which is called a skirmish, I don't have to paint that many models to add to that. I could paint, almost half as many models I just painted to get to the next bump. And it was the same way I did Horus Heresy. I cranked out like 1,500 points on Horus Heresy, and then I didn't have to to go to 2,000 points. It was, you had a Spartan, you had 2 dreadnoughts. Like it wasn't a huge amount of infantry. I did all infantry in the beginning too, just to get it out of the way. But then the second half is I try and once to twice a month also do projects just because I'm excited about them. And that's actually where that Legends of the Old West thing that I've done recently came in. Yep. There was like no reason for us to do that, except like I was literally in because I have my studio and I have a little warehouse space in the studio. And then I also have a storage unit where all of my other gaming stuff is. Like it's like a 10 by 15 storage unit that's just like packed to the ceiling with boxes. And I have to go in there every now and again to find something. So I'm opening boxes because I can't necessarily remember what's in every box. And I found a box that was like all my Warhammer historical books. And I was just like,
was there a moment, cool? Ash? There was a moment, wasn't there? There was like a little moment. Was there a moment for you when you opened that box and it was like a...
It was like, well, no, it was like, it was
like
just
the Ark of the Covenant.
Right.
It was just me remembering playing it before, and like the great time I had playing in the little office league that we had for Legend of the Old West. Yeah. And so I got the books out and I was like, I'm pretty sure I can find a bag of unpainted Black Scorpion miniatures here somewhere too if I dig long enough. And I've got like 3 or 4 friends that are all, former core workers and just like lifelong friends. That I know if I just send them an email and be like, dude, we should, it'll just, 3 weeks later, we'll both have armies and we'll have a table full of terrain and we play a game. And we just, and so that's an important other half of that is I kind of I do projects when I think they're important to do, but I let usually the guests that are coming in drive, again, that level of interest. And then I make sure that I'm doing something all the time that's just for me, just because I'm excited about it. And very often that pays off in weird ways, like the Legend of the Old West thing that I did, painting all like cowboy stuff. There's like a bunch of indie games coming out with an Old West theme right now, and there's a bunch of companies doing indie games, and they've all contacted me. I'm like, I love this. I love Legend of the Old West. I wrote a game. You should check it out. And I'm like, awesome. And I already have all the stuff done.
Right.
Yeah. Because I want to help everybody I can, give them a feature if they're an indie game. But the material requirement very often makes it so that I'm like, I don't want you to have to get in line. I'm basically backed up until summer. Come back to me in the summer and I'll talk to you about it. But I get these fortuitous moments where I do something that's in a similar vein, and it just means that they can send over whatever the basic core playing materials are, and I can get to break playing it. So there was just Osprey put out their catalog for 2017, and there was a game in it called what was it? Dracula's America. Yeah. And it's basically Dracula becomes president of the United States in the Old West.
Well, that's awesome. Nice. I'm in.
I texted it to my buddy Jen. I was like, ding, 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 we win.
That's awesome.
And so we have everything already to do that game.
So that's Ash. That's awesome. It's fantastic. So it sounds like you got it running. Patreon's been a great response. You're obviously getting lots of interactions online. What's been the most rewarding part of launching this whole thing? Other than that, it seems like you're making a good go of sort of like you've turned your hobby into a business, but still managed to keep it a hobby. What's been the most rewarding aspect of this?
I'd say probably just the number of people that have told me that their success has been helped along by me doing something for them. There's been a few people and I got to talk to a lot of Adepticon this year actually, that were just really like they came in and felt that they could thank me and that was worth doing, and that helped them out, because a lot of these little boutique companies are just a guy with an idea, you know what I mean? And so there's no if they don't have a whole bunch of money, they're not gonna be able to afford like a hub week on Beast of War or something like that that gets them the advertising they want. And so to have somebody just be like, yeah, I'll help. If I can, I'll help you. There's, I'll do what I can. It seems to be something that a lot of people, it helped them out. And so we've had I'm on almost 70 Widgets and Wonders episodes now, which is my show about little boutique gaming accessories and miniatures and stuff. and that's been pretty successful. And there's been a lot of people that have just been really responsive to that, and I have like repeat people that come back because it helped them out.
Yeah.
And then my Let's Plays, which are the Let's Try Out New Games features. That's been there's a few games now that people have said like that really gave us a boost. Like that was a big deal. I think that's it for me. Like,
awesome.
I love seeing people succeed. That's like my favorite thing. And so if I can in any way help people succeed, that's what I want this to be about. It's about showcasing the stuff it's about just kicking over the rocks and seeing all the cool stuff that's out there. Because there's so many talented people out there, and the internet's such a great forum for it. But there's so much noise,
right?
And like the big companies in this industry, even though they're not big, like by company standards, like in the rest of the world, in the real world, they're tiny. It's an order of magnitude tinier when you're one guy, you know what I mean, in a basement with like a cool line of miniatures or making laser cut terrain or whatever. And so to have somebody with a footprint that's as big as mine just be like, yeah, sure, man, it doesn't cost you anything. Like, this isn't advertising. I just want to show you off because I think what you do is cool. Seems to be something that's been successful. And then actually seeing the guys that have been part of the co-op to succeed. Mike Cousins and his painting service, and he's got like a really banging Twitch stream now. It's been really good. And then Owen's got a 5-figure footprint now on YouTube where he's over 10,000 viewers, and he just does like the guy's like the classic example of follow your heart. Like he just does whatever he feels like doing. But just seeing those guys succeed too has been fantastic. Just giving them a venue to do so.
That's awesome. Well, Ash, it's so fantastic to see. I just love how quickly you've been able to turn this into something amazing, but also I love the amount of variety you bring to it, right? And you really show that what the passion of miniature gaming really is, because it is something that's especially
and the depth.
And people that are outside of it don't really understand what's about. And I think what's really cool about what you do, it's really hard for us in an audio format to really help people understand what it is about miniature games that keep us coming back to them. But I think all your work really showcases that in a way that's really fantastic. And
you get to see not only the models, but like you said, you've got terrain for pretty much anything you can imagine. It's quite a collection.
It is awesome, and thanks
gets showcased in so many different ways.
It is, and the passion's there. I mean, Ash, that's what's amazing. I love your passion. I love your excitement. I love how you bring the energy to the industry, and it's just so awesome for you to do that. And so thanks for coming on and talking about that. We're going to take a quick break. And then we're going to come back and talk with more Ash on other stuff in a few minutes.
This is Total Fangirl. Regular Jane most days, Total Fangirl when the moment strikes. Han shot first. Starbuck is a guy. And Lestat, now there's a vampire. Hey everyone, this is Nicole, your Total Fangirl. You can follow me on Twitter at Nicole Wakelin and check out my blog, totalfangirl.com. Our shout out this week is to all of our wonderful supporters over at Patreon. Head to patreon.com/the D6 Generation and you too can support the show. Recently, there was a super nerd fest that happened down in Orlando, Florida, Star Wars Celebration, which moves around from year to year. And this year it was in Orlando, which makes a heck of a lot of sense since, Disney now owns the franchise. And I've always wanted to go and thought, oh, it'd be kind of cool, whatever, and never really went. And I was almost there at the right time, but I had work stuff that took me to New York City for the New York Auto Show, so I couldn't really go to Star Wars Celebration. And we're going on vacation to Disney World shortly, so I know I'm going to see a little bit of Star Wars / Disney stuff when we go down there, but I really wanted to go and I couldn't go. And then I almost got teased. So I was in Orlando for business that had nothing to do with Disney or Star Wars. And Delta Airlines had a great big travel nightmare when people got stranded everywhere and it was horrible. And I thought I was going to avoid it. Nope, I didn't. I was on my way to the airport and I got a notification that my flight was taking off at 4 instead of 11 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, no big deal. And then I pulled over and tried to check in and thought, why won't this let me check in? Why is this telling me this is more than a day away? And I realized it's not 4 the same day. It's 4 p.m. the following day. So I'm stuck there for a whole day. So I decided to to make the best of it. And I thought, I am going to have a magical day. And I went to Disney World and I spent the day there and had a great time. It was really fun. But then I even got a little teased a little more because, there's Star Wars stuff when you go to, what is it, Hollywood Studios, Disney Studios, Disney MGM Studios. I forget what they call it. I swear they change the name of that park every 5 minutes. Anyway, the one that has the Star Wars stuff in it. So I got that and I'm like, oh, I really want to see Celebration. And I see people and they're talking about going to Celebration and they're checking in that they're flying down. I'm getting even more and more jealous. And then the final straw, Dave, I'm pointing a finger at you, Dave Monroe. You put this video on my Facebook page of all the cool cars that they had there. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense, like cars, it's a Star Wars thing. No, people trick out their cars to look all Star Warsy. There was one that looked like Darth Vader. There's this really cool one that looked like Boba Fett and had sort of scratchy looking, but very cool looking Mandalorian armor on it. There was a Ford, I think it was a Ford F-150, like the big truck. And when you lifted the cover on the bed, inside the cover lit up with LED lights was a red version, glowy version of Han Solo in carbonite. So you had Han Solo in carbonite in the truck bed of your truck, and the whole truck itself was completely done up with beautiful images of Star Wars. And I couldn't imagine how you would drive this, because the first time a pebble hit that beautiful paint job, you'd probably, cry your eyes out and never forgive yourself for having driven it to the grocery store. So it was this amazing truck. But my favorite one of the whole bunch, there was a white Volkswagen Beetle, which is, really round car, and they had turned it into BB-8. And the car was the body, and they put a little head on the roof because the body already looks like BB-8. So you just need to pop the head on there. It was the cutest car I've ever seen in my entire life. So unbelievably cute. You'd want to hug it. It was adorable. So this was the final straw. Not only did I almost kind of sort of was in Orlando and almost kind of sort of saw a Celebration, and then I get teased with this amazing video of all these fans who had Star Warsified their cars. Now I have put Star Wars Celebration on the top of my list. I don't care what happens next time. Delta flight's messed up. New York Auto Show, doesn't matter. I have got to get myself to Star Wars Celebration.
You're listening to the Dice Tower Network at Dicetowernetwork.com. More fun than Merchant of Venus. Wait, what?
Who writes these?
Hey, welcome back. And so we've been teasing this for a while, this episode, and it's time for us to talk about miniatures agnostic systems, which is a term. I don't know, Ash, did you come up with that term, or are you just the first person I ever encountered to use it?
I don't know.
I'm going to give you credit. You can give me
credit if you want. I mean,
totally.
It's a term I've used for a long time.
Yeah.
I don't know if I came up with it or not, but it's pretty. So there's a subculture of people that game, and I want to call them convention gamers. Because a lot of the places that you see these guys are like the old school miniature conventions.
That sounds right.
Where they spend the whole year getting ready to play.
Yeah.
Getting ready to play this game that it's not a game you can buy. They probably made it up or wrote it, or it's a version of someone else's game that they've modified to play. And there's a collection of them on the internet in this forum called the Let Adventure Forum. I don't know if you've ever been there.
Yep.
It's my favorite miniature forum on the internet because it's a bunch of guys that just play with miniatures they like because they want to. And it's fabulous. But that's kind of, I guess, where I got the term from. Was sort of hanging out and perusing what those guys do online.
Cool. And so what if you had to explain in a nutshell to folks what a miniature agnostic system was? What would you how would you do that?
So usually it's a set of miniature game rules where all it is a set of rules, right? You're not buying. It's not a miniature company. It's not a miniature company. Is what I really should say. It's people that aren't interested in designing miniatures. What they're interested in is giving you a framework to buy and paint and build the miniatures that you want to buy and build and paint. And I would actually say that there's also, to flip that over, there's also game agnostic miniature companies.
Right.
Yes,
it's both end, right? Both those things exist. So there's some great companies out there that just make rules. And of course the big sort of spearhead right now is Osprey Games has become the company that collects and actually does publication of these rules, and is like the sort of the masthead now for a lot of indie developers. And then sort of the flip side of that is there's a lot of companies out there that do game agnostic miniatures. So the biggest one I think of is Reaper. Right, Reaper's just you can probably dive into a rack of Reaper miniatures and find whatever you're looking for eventually.
Oh yeah.
And their line is so huge that you can find almost anything. But then there's companies like Kev White's Hassle-Free Miniatures, one of my favorite all-time sculptors. He's just got this great line of like goofy, crazy, modern adventures, sci-fi adventures, post-apocalyptic adventures, and these two things are out there, and I think what happens is people collect miniatures because they like them, and then these rule books come along that don't care what miniatures you use, and give you an excuse to play with the miniatures you want, and you just kind of pick and choose the ones you like.
Cool.
Exactly.
And yeah, I think I first noticed the concept with Frostgrave, and that was my first miniatures agnostic. Because I think, Russ, this is true of you also to a certain extent. I think we really enjoy getting like the whole universe sort of in a package deal, and there's an aesthetic that carries through, and there's a backstory that you can really sink your teeth into. And although there's a bit of a backstory to Frostgrave, it's more of a generic sort of fantasy. Each war party is like revolves around a wizard, of course, or an apprentice. But for the most part, it's sort of generic fantasy models that you're playing with. And I think that's kind of where this whole concept sort of sank its fangs into me. And I think it makes sense to me now that I think about it more that it was fantasy, because fantasy, your fantasy miniatures could be any of a countless fantasy novels that you've read through your life or movies that you've seen, where the sort of like the world building isn't quite as elaborate as it might be for science fiction, for instance, where you've got all kinds of different alien races and everything that's going to really add a lot of difference to it. Whereas in fantasy, you might have some elves, you might have some dwarves. For the most part, everybody's going to be humanoid, and you're gonna recognize a fighter versus a magic user right off the bat. So it's all working off the same template. And I really got excited about Frostgrave. Went in and built a whole Frostgrave table. Got really excited about that. And then, as most things happen around here, it got churned under by the next big thing that came along. But I still have all the cool terrain. And I've got all these models. I mean, it literally spurred me to paint probably half of the Bones models that I got from 2.5 Kickstarters. So that's cool.
I think that was part of the power of Frostgrave was it came out and it appealed to that generation of guys who might be miniature gamers. They might not even still be miniature gamers, but they've got that like cookie tin full of their old D&D models kicking around.
Right. Yep.
And that was all you needed. Like you could just play the game with that. And I think for a lot of people, dusting off those models and having an excuse to use them again, because Frostgrave really is like a game of D&D where you don't need a DM, but there's still cool, surprising, random things that happen because the game is progressively generated as you do things. Which I think is part of the brilliance of how Joe wrote it. And then the other half of that is when you're playing with those models that you had from 20 years ago, you're actually reliving the stories that they had when you played D&D with them, or when you know what I mean? Like playing with old models has its own charm because you're sort of transported back to that time in your life when you first played with those models. So I think it hit on two levels there. One, you can use whatever miniatures you want to play a game. And two, it is kind of a retro game itself. And I think it kind of appealed to a certain generation of gamers who didn't want to play a war game. They wanted to have a little adventure. And I think that sounds like it was you. You had all these Reaper Bones.
Yeah, it was me. Yeah. Now, other than like the not having a whole universe with a whole line of miniatures and everything, why do you think, because I think there's a bit of a stigma, or maybe it's fading away now, but why do you think many gamers kind of avoid these agnostic systems?
Well, I think it's generational, and I think it has to do more with how you were exposed to leisure activities in your life. So, what I found, and I found this actually working for Games Workshop, over the years was the people that played miniature games, the hobbyists, became more and more driven that they needed permission to do things. They would only operate inside the guidelines of the rules.
Right.
And that tends to come from being in a competitive mindset. You know what I mean? So like, I'll take it right to Magic cards. Why would you ever own 4 of any one Magic card? You should never own 4 of any one Magic card, like, because you can never use 4 of one Magic card. There's no actual natural law stating that you can't own more than 4 of one Magic card. Right. But that's the standard deck building mechanic in Magic. And so you have people acting in accordance with the rules. And I think that's the problem sometimes with games where it requires you to project a bunch of creativity onto them, is people aren't used to doing that anymore. In War Machine, right? You don't even create your own characters.
Right. Yep.
You use pre-generated characters all the time, and it's very much like you said, a pre-packaged product where you are combining effects. But War Machine is the best analog to Magic the Gathering on a tabletop format, and it's been emulated since by other games, like Malifaux emulates that, and other things emulate that, where you're not actually projecting yourself into it. And whereas a game like Frostgrave, you have to come up with your wizard's name. You have to decide what he's armed with. You have to decide what your soldiers are armed with. All of that stuff comes down to you. And so I think if you grew up in like the 70s and 80s, you're very used to that, because most of your exposure to tabletop gaming comes from stuff where you are using your imagination first. I don't know if you guys remember, but in the 80s, there was those little pictures on the sides of all the Games Workshop boxes that said 3D role play.
Yes. Yeah.
Remember that? 3D role play. You can role play in 3D and have all the action in front of you instead of in your head. And it was this, like, it was a tagline. It was a brand thing for Games Workshop. Yeah. Role play in 3D in front of you. It was even on the side of Adeptus Titanicus. So a giant robot game, right? You even had 3D role play, like, right on the side.
Yep.
And that's not the way that people are introduced to leisure activities now, right? You're introduced to video games. You just push a button and you're immersed. It's all being fed to you.
Yeah.
And so when you come to something like this, it's a bit jarring that the expectation is that you actually create it for yourself. That's atypical right now in the industry that you would do that. And I think you even see that in video games, like the rise in popularity of, the esports video game, like let's just say Call of Duty. As the Call of Duty games went higher and higher in number, their single player campaigns went less and less and less. And even your single player characters all of a sudden had names and stories. You weren't just faceless grunt from Call of Duty 1. You know what I mean? You're a random GI dumped on Normandy Beach. Now you've got a name and your own story. You're actually a character. They're not letting you project your own, like, imagination on who you are and what you're doing there. You're just being told a story, and you're kind of just like moving through it as it goes on rails. And so, yeah, it's funny. I think that really is it. Is it requires a level of commitment and creativity that's kind of atypical in miniature games. I mean, it still exists in most Games Workshop games, but even then, in the new version of Age of Sigmar, there's not really any customization. Right. You have a character, and he's got what he's got. And you've got name characters and they've got what they've got. And you don't really kit bash. It's not like in, second edition 40K where you could literally have anybody armed with anything. This is my Imperial assassin on a bike with polymorphine hiding inside one of your orcs. Right. In Terminator armor with a vortex grenade. I will admit I did play that model once. Wearing Terminator armor, riding a bike with a vortex grenade inside your orc.
Why wouldn't you?
Well, because I mean, I would have been 12 or 13 years old and thought that was the coolest thing ever.
Exactly. That's the whole point.
And that was the whole point. Yeah. So I guess to make it a short story long, that's my reasoning, is that it's becoming less and less, even just culturally, a thing that we do where we are asked to come up with the stuff for ourselves and we're just kind of fed the story. So it's a bit punk rock to do that.
There you go.
I think
counterculture.
I think that's right. That's a really good point. I think it's a really good point, because I think you see it. And when it does show back up again, it kind of shocks everyone, right? Like when Skyrim came out, it was a huge deal again, because all of a sudden you were literally like moving your nose 2 centimeters up on the character's face when you designed it, right? And so there are still RPGs out there, video games, that do that, but they're almost like the exception now, and people freak out, right? It's like, oh, look, I can do all this stuff.
And they take forever to develop.
Right.
Like, you can't do one in a year. Like Bethesda's development cycle is like 3 years now?
Right.
And it's because they make these games that you never finish.
Right. So it's really interesting. And I think miniature games are the same way, right? They were inspired initially by RPGs, like you described with GW's early stuff was kind of like in the 80s, dovetailing off of Dungeons & Dragons' success and saying, look, we're D&D in space in 3 dimensions, right? And now you have, but now what you've got now is we've gone away from that because people are trying to make super clean, highly optimized, super competitive games. And now but to do that, reducing customization makes it easier to balance, right? So
yeah,
you get a more balanced game.
Esports. It's League of Legends, the miniature game.
Right. You get a much more balanced game if that's your cup of tea, but you got a much less customizable game, to your point, if that's what you want. So I do, and I've talked before, I'm a huge fan of War Machine, but I do miss, and I've always talked about this, that the characters, you can't build yourself or something crazy as a character. You're always playing a named person. So I love, and I think that's what made Frostgrave and some of these other games so much fun. Like when we were talking about, when Craig and I started playing Rogue Stars, what's a lot of fun about that is you're creating a character. It is like an RPG. It's just the battle system of an RPG, right? But you're creating a person. You're figuring out what they're going to do. You're designing their gear. I think there's a lot to be said for designing that and then seeing it, do stuff on a table. I think that's a lot of the fun.
Well, I think some miniature companies. Sorry, I think just to sort of like dovetail on your point. I think some miniature companies are realizing too that the longer they go without the customers kind of being invested in what they make too, the less likely those customers are to be lifelong customers. You know what I mean? Like when Mark III War Machine came out, there was that joke like, oh, it's a great time to buy War Machine Army because you can get lots of unpainted ones on eBay right now.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because like whatever tier list went away and that guy that owned 20 Doom Reavers couldn't use his 20 Doom Reavers anymore. And so he just walked away. Like, and I think that's the less you care about the work and the time you put into something, the easier it is to walk away from it. And that's a balance I think you have to walk now in any kind of like especially in a miniature game where you're spending a premium amount of money on something,
right?
And most of that time is being spent not actually playing the game. Like 90% of your time is being spent thinking about playing games, putting together the things that you need to play a game, but not actually rolling the dice. So the more they remove that 90% of the time, the less likely you are to value, I think, what you're doing. And that's where you get these board game hybrids and prepaid miniature games coming in and trying to like gobble up fast players, but it's fast nickels over slow dimes.
Do you guys think, is there a stigma at all to companies that are only making rules? Is there sort of like people think, well, if you can't do it all, then obviously you can't do the one thing you're doing right. Sort of like it's like Bush League. Because that's what I thought once. It's no longer what I think. But I did think once, like, hey, if you can't do it all, then obviously, you can't do the one thing you're doing.
I think there's something there, but I think what you're really saying is, I'm afraid no one will play this with me.
That's true too, yes.
Right, because it's not so much it seems Bush League. It's that if this thing isn't super visible, you know what I mean? Yeah. And a wall of miniatures is super visible in a gaming store. A rack of 2 or 3 books isn't.
Right.
People go to the party in high school that they've already been told it's a good party. Right? So if you see a bunch of people doing stuff, if it looks impressive, you've got more chance to go and be part of it with more unknowns than not unknowns. Right. And especially the number one thing that makes people play miniature games is seeing other people having fun playing miniature games.
Yeah.
The second thing is a big impressive wall of product. But I think what's happening now that's even the playing field, and I think we talked about this earlier, is that thing that happened in 1996 where miniature companies realized they could harness the internet to make themselves seem bigger than they are. It's the Peacock method, right?
Right.
Every company looks like their Games Workshop from the size of their website, even if there's only 24 people working there. Like it seems like it's going to be a fun party and it looks super professional. So it removes that hesitation of, I don't think anyone is ever going to do this or know what this is. So why would I spend money on it? Because that money becomes a wasted investment.
Right. So I do think there's that. But Craig, I also think it does depend on how, if you want tight rules, okay, I'm not going to say competitive because I think Ash is making a good point about not everybody wants competitive rules. But if you want tight rules, if you want rules that don't break under certain scenarios, I do think that a lot of these companies don't go through as much play testing and iterations and support of their rules post-production and really, have a hardcore community and really identify how to optimize the rules because they feel like the game isn't about optimizing the rules. The game's about providing a framework for you to optimize for yourself. And if you want to self-optimize, that's fine. But if you do want a set of rules that sort of, gets better over time and sort of really does that, I don't know if you get that as much with some of these sets that you do get with a company like Privateer or Games Workshop or others who are really invested in making sure their rules are in at least in a zone where people can say that's a pretty well edited rule book. That's a pretty well thought out, way to lay the rules and teach the game. That's a pretty well thought. You know what I mean? So I do think there's something there that a lot of these they have some really cool mechanics in them, really innovative stuff. But I don't know if they have a complete package like, do you always roll a nice balanced mission, or not even balanced, but a mission that's fun for both sides, or do you always get, you know what I mean? Like there's things can happen that are a little bit like we found this in Rogue Stars, right? As the model count breaks down, so that as you beat the other guy up and he gets down to one model, suddenly the interrupt system gets a little weird, right? Because one guy is going to take a million you know what I mean? Like some of the system breaks down a little bit in certain scenarios, right? So I just think there's a little bit of that does happen, and it's just because they don't have the level of play test, they don't have the budget or the people. They're a much smaller company, right?
Or is it that they're
I think it's because they don't
something
care.
Or they don't care.
Yeah.
I think it's because they don't care. I don't think it's because of the budget or the amount of playtesting. I think it's because those guys are writing rules and they don't care how balanced they are. Because especially with war game or war band games, where guys get better over time, it's impossible to balance the game. Right. After the first game, you're just not balanced. Like you don't even try anymore, and so you're more worried about how the game feels than how it plays.
Mm-hmm. I also think they're trying to do something that's probably a lot more difficult than just a clean, straight up, balanced match. So when you're trying to add these other aspects in, I think that maybe that balance is one thing that goes away also.
Yeah, you can't let players tinker with their characters and have a game remain balanced. Like it's just not possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Like as soon as the players get involved in tinkering with the base mechanics of the game through optimization and the more options you give, there's always going to be unintended consequences. And I honestly think that most of these writers, they're trying to create an experience, not a rule set. Like they want a game to feel a certain way, but they don't care if it breaks under pressure, because it's going to. Like you just, there's nothing you can do about it. It's going to break at some point. Not designed to be played competitively. It's designed to be played socially.
Right. So if you've decided now to jump into one of these, what do you guys think we need? Like if you're going to try to step into a miniatures agnostic system, what do you need sort of in your collection to make it work?
You mean miniatures, or you just mean stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, what kind of stuff are you like? First, you'll need the miniatures, and then what other what stuff that you find in your collection that generally, like, maybe you have this from this game and this from that game, but then you start repurposing it for these systems that don't have that kind of mechanical or technical support. Like tokens and things like that.
Yeah, I keep like I don't know if you guys remember in Malifaux or in early War Machine, before there was token sets, you'd use those little glass beads. I think they get used a lot in Magic too. Those are always handy to have around. I actually get a lot of use out of bingo chips, different colored bingo chips, because they're all writable. Like you can just write on them with dry erase markers.
Yeah.
And then there's a few companies that make like generic accessories for games. The biggest one is Litco. Mm-hmm. Yep. And very often, if you're going into playing a miniature game that doesn't have, like, that says like it would be handy if you had X or Y, but like they're not going to make it for you because it's just a rule book.
Yeah.
Litco's, if you just peruse Litco's website for like 45 minutes, they'll have something to work for it. Right. Litco's great for that kind of stuff because they've just got tons of like just sort of generic gaming accessories that you can buy. And they do custom orders too. So I've got friends who've just said like, I need X, Y, or Z. So like I had a friend who was playing Bushido for the first time, and he wanted a bunch of tokens, and they have printable tokens in the book, but he was just like, can you make these for me? And they're like, sure, $40. And they sent him like a whole token set for the game, basically, that was, custom etched and ready to rock and roll.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then other than that, I'd say the most important thing to have in your collection, and this is going to sound stupid, but you know how like in the front of every rulebook, there's like that little like short syllabus of like, you will need, like you need some pens and paper, and you need some miniatures and a flat playing surface and some appropriate terrain for blah, blah, and some models. And the last line is always, and a friend. You got to have somebody who's also invested in the idea, because most of these miniature agnostic games are about exploring something that the mass market isn't really interested in. You know what I mean? So like either an idea, a trope, like you said, like On Guard, for instance, is it's basically like Three Musketeers style dueling. Yeah. So like, you're talking about Louis the 13th court style challenges and duels. And that's a very specific thing.
Yes. Yeah.
But you could just as easily take that rule set and be like, we're just going to play Star Wars with this, but it's going to be Jedis. It's going to be Jedis dueling instead of anybody. You know what I mean? And like, we'll use all our Star Wars miniatures for it. And I think that you get the most out of games like that when you've got another person that's excited about doing that idea with you. And so in my experience, that's the number one thing when I do one of these games that I look for is I've got a sort of a core group of friends, and usually we'll look at the rule book and we'll come up with an idea of a setting we want to do and a thing we want to do. And then we'll just go to town on it. And that is the best resource you can have to play one of these games is another person that's going to get creative and have a good time telling the little story that this game's going to tell.
Right. Yeah.
But then that's true for every miniature game, because every miniature game is as good as the opponents you play with.
So, Russ.
Yes.
Russ, you still with us?
I am indeed.
That made me a little nervous there.
No, just the bare arm fell off. I'm putting the bare arm back on.
Oh, this is what's
does he have the right? Wait, does he have the right to bear arms?
I see what you did there.
Oh, look at that. Oh, wow. It went from, wow, okay. Anyway.
Apparently not.
So, Russ.
Yes.
If you decided that you, not pushed by me, but you were going to try for, or maybe if you felt that you were susceptible to a miniatures agnostic system, what would you like? What would attract you to that, or what would you what would lead you down that path? Do you think?
So I have two things about miniature gaming that I really enjoy. I really enjoy, as Ash mentioned earlier, I'm attracted to certain styles of models and certain universes, right? So that really attracts me. But I also I do like relatively clean and elegant rules. So I appreciate, because I'm also a board gamer, right? And so I appreciate when rules accomplish something that's complex in a really clean and elegant way, right? And so there are some games out there where they have really cool models and really cool universe. One of those games is like Infinity, where I don't like the rules for Infinity because I think they're overly complex. Now, I'm not picking on the game. I know there's a lot of passionate players out there for it, but I just feel it's too heavy for me to get invested in and learn all those rules. But I really love the anime-style models. I love the universe. I love the concept. I love all the factions. So for me, and I have a small collection of Infinity models, and I would love to have an excuse to paint more Infinity models, but I really don't have any desire to learn the Infinity rule set. So I look at a game like Rogue Stars, and I'm like, ooh, this could be something that I take the Infinity models that I really enjoy, and I even pretend I'm in the Infinity universe, but maybe I use the Rogue Star rules, which are a little more, wacky RPG fun, but they're also not nearly as heavy as the Infinity rules, and I can do all those crazy things I'd like to do in Infinity, have a crazy terrain and really enjoy that experience, but not have to, use a rule set I might enjoy more than the ones that come with the game. So for me, that's something that would attract me. Like, I got some miniatures. I want to get them to the table more often. I don't have a rule set that I enjoy for them. Is there one of these other rule sets I can pop in there and try out? And then the second thing for me would be, because I'm such a rules junkie, if they have a really innovative mechanic in there, like Rogue Star. I love the Rogue Stars mechanic of sort of stealing the initiative, right? Stealing the interaction. That's really fun for me. So getting to play that, experience that interaction with cool miniatures on the table is more of a reason to try that system out. So it's got to be those three things. I need some miniatures I don't have a rule set for, and then a rule set that's kind of got me intrigued by a mechanic or two. Does that make sense?
Cool. Yeah. Ash, do you look for specific games of this type, or is it just when something catches your fancy, you run with it?
Usually I don't start looking for a rule set until I got a bunch of models I want to use. And if I don't find one, I usually just make up rules.
Right.
So it's funny because I'm in a position right now that I'd never been in before, where rules kind of come to me. So I don't really do that anymore. You know what I mean? Like I'm more being shown stuff than I am actually actively looking for it. But in the past, previously, it would be, hey, look at these awesome models I have. Wouldn't it be cool if we could play a game of blah? Let's go hit, Let Adventure Forum or Google and see if anybody's got a good rule set that we could play at these models with. And that was usually the starting point. Is like, wouldn't it be funny if we X or Y, and then just sort of like find a way to accommodate that. And now it's kind of inverted, and it's like, hey, I got this cool new rule set I'm going to check out. What, box of miniatures do I have lying around that I haven't painted for 10 years? And let me tell you, I got through a lot of old Kickstarter miniatures that way. A lot of my Mercs Recon minis got painted for Rogue Stars, as did part of my Sedition Wars Kickstarter that never got painted. And Scrappers is going to have the rest of my Sedition Wars stuff get painted. And then what was the other one? Horizon Wars got me to finally paint all my Robotech stuff that I was probably never going to paint.
I have all the Robotech stuff too, so I'll have to check that out.
And literally never played a game.
Yeah.
Horizon Wars is cool because it lets you design all your own mechs and stuff. So like it's literally just it's another miniature agnostic game for playing company-sized 6 to 15 millimeter like scale giant mecha and planes and whatever games.
Cool. That sounds awesome. So it sounds to me like all of us are kind of model oriented, especially with this kind of experience where if we've got the models or we want to find something to do with the models that we've got, that'll kind of drive us. So actually, Russ, as I'm looking at the notes, I didn't even think about Gutshot it being in the same category, but it totally is.
It is, yeah.
That was our first foray into
Miniature Agnostic.
Into Miniatures Agnostic Games.
Gutshot's what, a cowboy game?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think I've heard of it. I think I might have the rule book. I own a lot of cowboy
games. Very similar. You'd like it, Ash. It's very similar to games like Frostgrave, where there's rules in there for like things like tipping your hat and all these little things. Like it's very much an RPG, miniature game. You think Frostgrave in the Old West, essentially what it is, and you can.
I actually just got a new one like that called Shoot and Skedaddle. And it's another cowboy game, and it's got that same kind of thing. It's like, but it's use a card deck to do a lot of the stuff, and like randomly someone can just like throw a bottle out of the bar at you. Like that kind of stuff can just happen.
Yeah, Gutshot uses cards for their initiative mechanic, which is cool because you can actually buy extra cards to go into the deck so that you're going to get more actions as they come up. That was a great system, and now that one, Russ, that one started with the rules and then went into the miniatures because we went from this really cool rule set that I don't even remember how it was brought to our attention. It was so long ago, but then of course everyone in the local scene scattered looking for cool cowboy minis, and I think I finally settled on Black Scorpion, but other guys, there were lots of other companies and now there's even more companies that do cool cowboy minis.
Yeah. Well, Black Scorpion just actually started their own game. The guy that's they're basing it on Cutlass. They're doing a Tombstone miniature game, which looks pretty cool. I'm going to check it out when it hits retail.
I totally forgot that. That's true. So there's the dog wagging the tail wagging the dog. I don't even know what's going on at that point. So Russ, what are some other things that you've enjoyed or experiences that you've had?
Oh, well, I do like I said, I like to bring the different miniatures together. I really enjoyed Gutshots. I love, and I think Ash pointed this out too, I like excuses. I think there's two things that I like. One is if I have miniatures I want to go find a game for, right?
Yeah.
But the other one is just an excuse to paint up a few models I haven't painted in that genre. Like when Gutshot came out, I hadn't painted a cowboy miniature. I remember when I got into Malifaux, I really loved this. I played the guild because I liked the cowboy look, but there's not that many cowboys in the guild, right? There's like 3, and then you're on to like weird stuff. So like I really wanted, no pun intended. So what I really wanted to do was find, and so when Gutshot comes, like, oh cool, look at all these different cowboys I can now start collecting and painting for this great game. So I like that it throws me into a new genre to check those kind of things out. And I just, again, it's a fun way to try different things out. And it's
like tapas. You don't have to have a whole meal, but you can try lots of little stuff. It's miniature tapas.
It is brilliant.
That's perfect.
That's exactly what it is. It's a dabble. It's just dabbling in there, trying it out.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Rogue Stars, since that's what really spurred this whole thing on, and us to reach out to Ash, because I went and I found his videos looking for Rogue Stars stuff. And so Russ, you mentioned that there's a mechanic. So first of all, what everybody hears when they think, or when they hear about Rogue Stars, it seems like even people I've told this that I've told this is not true, they always fall back on, well, it's the sci-fi Frostgrave, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. It kind of got billed that way, I think, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And I think that was mostly to do with the fact that Nick at North Star, Nick Geyer, did a Kickstarter for it. So he did a bunch of models, and they did some sort of like, I guess, pre-advertising for it, and it looked like it was going to be, because without anyone having actually read the rules, it looked like it was going to be like a nice light, sort of like pseudo RPG with models. The difference is there's a significant amount more bookkeeping in Rogue Stars than there is in Frostgrave. It's a wonderfully dynamic game because you get to do whatever you want, but that means that there is a lot of like pre-game, like designing your characters and stuff. Whereas with Rogue Stars, you build your warband in the first like 10 minutes. You know what I mean? Like the longest part is really picking your spells, and even that only picking 8 spells. In Frostgrave, yeah. And then you're just like, you're good to go. And so I think there was a bit of like sort of miscommunicated expectation at the beginning, and it really is a very different animal. It's a much more dynamic, story-driven, player input game. So in Frostgrave, you got given stories in the scenarios and stuff. Right. Whereas you develop a story before each game of Rogue Stars. Right. And you even develop all your characters.
Now explain for the listeners a little bit, Ash, how do you develop that story before the game?
So there's a 3-table system where you develop the mission. So the one player develops the mission, and then the other player develops the setting and the complications, the environment and the complication. And it's you kind of have to go gentleman's agreement-y. Like if you just follow like I roll on the table, and you don't work out how those three things are going to apply to each other, you can end up being like, well, we don't even have the scenery for this, you know? Like you, so you can either pick or roll randomly. I like rolling randomly and then doing your best to accommodate with what you have, and even just slightly changing the story to accommodate it. So like for instance, in our 3rd or 4th game, we rolled. The mission was a derelict spacecraft, but then it was the environment was like a radiation zone, and then the complication was love is in the air. And so like instead of having the spacecraft be in space, we just had it be on the ground. Yeah. And we had it be like a big open like engineering derrick that had basically just been like crash landed. And you need to be able to just like apply some common sense to make your collection of scenery and the story that you roll up like work. Right. Because there's a lot of like it gives you like a starting point. I don't know if anyone remembers the D1000 scenario table from Rogue Trader. Yes. But it's kind of like that, where you're like, oh no, the Tyrannosaurus Rex ate the only transporter to the ship, and the solar radiation storm's coming, and let's randomly roll up our characters and go. I'm your 40k dungeon master.
And interestingly, some of that even made it into the Space Marine movie.
It did. Yeah, exactly. And so like for all 5 listeners that watched that movie, I think the cool thing about Rogue Stars is you get tons of that like story and stuff into it. Yeah. But it is a lot more like player intensive, where you need to do a lot of work sort of like before and during to bring the table to life in the story.
Yep. And now, Russ, you were mentioning the initiative and the stealing the initiative mechanic that you like. What can you talk a little bit more for the audience about why, like, what that is and why that's kind of like that's totally different from Frostgrave, which is now Frostgrave's got an interesting initiative mechanic where you're going to roll for it each turn, but then you kind of have the ability to bring your henchman along with you, your wizard, and then his apprentice a little bit. But other than that, it's basically back and forth. You go, I go, model by model.
Well, it's still simultaneous game turn though, because you've blended the phases, right? Like it's not everyone goes, you know what I mean, and then the other side goes. It's your wizard goes.
No, right? Yeah.
Like, so there's a bit of a simultaneous game turn.
Model by it's a model by model. You go, I go. Right.
Integrated turn.
Integrated turn.
Yeah, I would not call it you go, I go, because you go, I go is generally associated with like war.
You go,
yes.
I misused the term,
but.
I apologize, Russ. So talk a little bit about how it works in Rogue Stars then.
Yeah,
how that's different from Frostgrave.
Yeah, what I really like about how Rogue Stars does it, and there's one other board game we happened to see at Edcon. It did something similar, and it was the first time I'd seen this mechanic in either place, which is
Miniature game.
Yeah, which is this idea that you're going to go ahead and activate a model. You're going to roll some pool of dice to see how many activations your model succeeds at doing, which we've seen in some games before. When you're and you mentioned there's this pretty complicated character creation mechanic, and part of that is in giving an activation target number. Now we should say that a Rogue Star is a D20 system, right? So I'm going to roll some number of D20. I can choose up to 3,
And if I'm rolling 3d20 for my character I'm about to activate, I'm essentially, so first as the player, I'm choosing which character I'm going to attempt to activate first. And there's already a tactical decision to be made because the characters who have lower success numbers, i.e. a better chance to succeed at their activation total or activation roll, are a better choice for me tactically in terms of my likelihood to get all my actions off, but they may not be the guy I necessarily want to activate first given the tactical situation I'm on the table, right? So there's already that conflict. But the second part that's really interesting is so I roll my d20. Every d20 that comes up at or higher than my activation number means I get my activation off. However, any d20 that misses that number, my opponent has a couple of choices. They can either attempt to steal the overall initiative from me and just take my turn completely away from me and now have his initiative, or he can attempt to just interrupt with one of his characters, and each character also has an interrupt number, and so he's going to get to roll a d20 for each of those failures I had and try to exceed his interrupt number to see if his character can shoot me first before I get to shoot him or move against him. And it's a really
and all his actions go before yours too, which can be devastating.
Which can be devastating, right? So you're choosing. So what I like about this mechanic is, first of all, it makes the game very interactive, where you're really watching. Even in integrated turns, usually the other player is going to do his model activation. You're kind of just watching. In this game, you're literally watching as he decides his number of actions he gets because you might be jumping at any moment. And the second part is you've got a lot of tactical decisions to make, and it's a lot of risk mitigation you got to worry about. So I really like that tactical challenge with it, and I really like that integration of the activation, not even of the turn. It's the activation itself is integrated, which is pretty slick.
Right.
Yeah, it's worth noting your models get stressed too as you do that. Yes. So the more you activate somebody, you can kind of go ham and Rambo, like feeding orders to someone in Infinity and just going and going and going. Right. But the more stressed you become, the easier it is for your opponent to seize the initiative off you, and the harder it is for that model to activate too. Yep. And even in the ARO mechanic, the when you get to respond with your dice, your opponent gains stress too. So if he responds to you a whole bunch during his turn, he then starts his turn stressed.
Right.
And we've actually had turns where he's stolen the initiative, and I've just immediately stolen it right back.
Yep. I think it's brilliant. I love that part because what happens there, that's a nice mechanic because if you get lucky and continually succeed, you're still building up lots of stress. So at some point, it becomes just it's academic. Your opponent steals it from you, right? Or if your opponent gets lucky and steals the initiative a lot, he's going to build up stress. So that's a really nice mechanic as well. So it's a little more record keeping and a lot more stats on a model, but I like how it works, and it makes for a really interesting game.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. And the pushing the activations in Infinity was one of the reasons that Infinity kind of broke in my head. I didn't like the idea that half of these models were just there to give their activation to another guy.
Truly,
and the reason that I don't get that feeling at all in this is that you are building up stress. So it's going to be maybe you're going to be really good. Maybe you paid the points in character creation to get his activation number low enough that he really can do 5, 6, 7. I had a probe droid that had 8 activations. It was pretty cool. But that was just ridiculous rolling.
It was just all probing.
It was all. Actually, he had a little laser gun. He was doing more damage than any of my.
He was surprisingly accurate.
Russ may have a good point in my creation of the Stormtrooper.
They really don't. Yeah, we were playing Star Wars, but it was cool. There was a lot of cool stuff happening.
Yeah, that's why I need to get away from the Star Wars models. But anyway, but I enjoy it because you've got that pushing you push your luck sort of mechanic, but then you get to that tight spot where you're not going to be rolling 3 dice anymore because it could be so devastating not to hand that much over to the other guy that you're rolling 1 die at a time for activation and just hoping for the best. And there's every game I've played. Well, first you have to understand you're going in, as Ash said, it's an experience that you're looking for. It's not going to be a tight competitive game that you're going to be playing. Really, you're just going to have to accept that really wacky and crazy things are going to happen. And it's swingy. It's a D20 system, so that it does have that in common with Frostgrave, where it can get really swingy, and your luck can just all of a sudden go take a left turn, and your biggest monster character just gets wiped off the board with 1 shot.
It means anybody can be a hero too, though, which is nice.
Exactly.
Luck, guys can just come back and be superheroes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what happened in our game where the probe droid just was off on the side, not doing anything, and all of a sudden came in and was a hero probe droid. But
Futurama heroed his way through it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I really enjoyed and appreciated that aspect of the game. Even though it's a little swingy, you go in excited because you're just like going to see how this story plays out, and it's going to be fun. And every game so far has had these moments in it where you're just like, it's getting really tense, and then, oh, I can't believe that happened. And it's not often that you can get a moment like that. Like moments like that to me in War Machine and even 40K, those are few and far between when something so surprising can happen all of a sudden, really. And at the same time, it's not like, oh, that surprised me, and no, it sucks because now I'm out of the tournament or whatever.
I call that the Blood Bowl mentality, where something can just happen that totally swings it, and there's actually cheering at the gaming table.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking
about.
But
I think that's one of the things you have to be comfortable with in a game like this. It does have the what I like to refer to as the Malifaux death mechanic, which is basically it's very swingy whether a character lives or dies when he gets hit, right? So it's because it is D20 and there's a lot of spread there, you have to be comfortable that your hero could just be one-shotted on the first shot of the game, or that conversely your opponent's guy could survive everything you throw at him for 5 turns in a row, even if your entire army shoots the same dude, right? It's that kind of a game, so you have to be comfortable with the fact that story is going to unfold, and that's okay. You can't be striving for some kind of realistic thing, because it's not what this game has. Which is okay. I like it a lot.
You either get Samuel L. Jackson in Deep Blue Sea, or you turn into Bullet Tooth Tony and just can't be killed.
Right.
Deep Blue Sea reference. I like it.
Nice.
I'm digging deep today.
That was great. Yeah. Yeah. I think I literally said, I just got Django Fedded right there. It's kind of
there you go.
decapitation.
Yeah. We are not going to let these sharks, and then just
and then you get your torso bitten off.
Right.
Sorry if I ruined Deep Blue Sea for anybody. But
spoiler alert!
Is it too soon for Deep Blue Sea?
Too soon.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna have to put a label on the episode.
Excellent.
Right. If you haven't seen the cult hit Deep Blue Sea,
I feel like we may have reached the end here if we're talking. Well, Ash, I got to thank you. I know you have an incredibly busy schedule, many things going on. I have to thank you for taking time out of it to join us here on the D6 Generation.
That's been awesome.
Really appreciate it. If folks want to find out more about what you're up to in Guerrilla Miniature Games and everything else, where should they go on the inner tubes to find the latest about Ash?
Probably the best spot, because it's just like the easiest to get in touch with me, and it's updated every single day, is just my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/out-of-the-basement into the streets. And that's my my hub for most things. So like all my content gets posted there on YouTube. You can also go to YouTube, youtube.com/c/Guerrilla Miniature Games, and see all the actual like videos and stuff. But the nonsense usually happens on the Facebook page, and it also aggregates all the like serious stuff. And I'm on Patreon as well, just as patreon.com/Josh Barker.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Well, thanks again, Ash, and don't be a stranger. We'd love to have back on again in the future.
For sure, yeah, anytime.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ash.
This edition of Did You Ever Notice was brought to you by all of our fine friends over at Patreon. The men, the women, the champions that have kept the D6 generation going for the last 5 years and more. Without you, there would be no D6 generation at this point, and think about all the free time all of you would have. Today in particular, I would like to thank Nate Hendon, Nathan Owen, Inkai Tech, Nick Pacholski, and Nicholas Oxley, and thank all of you that have taken the time to go in and kick a couple coins into that box every now and then and keep the lights on. Did you ever notice how some people have such an easy time with matters of willpower? I mean, people who can just lose a lot of weight quickly, or don't have to worry about, smoking cessation regimens or anything. They just stop smoking when they want. Well, I'm one of those people, generally speaking, or I've always thought that I was. And when I need to, and I put my mind to it, my weight generally drops relatively quickly. I touched upon this in the last episode, where I said I'd made some pretty sweeping changes, and I'm proud, and I think I should be, to say that I have lost 40 pounds in the last 3 months. So, pretty happy with those results. pretty unhappy that I had 40 pounds to lose, however, because longtime listeners will remember that I lost not quite that much, but a goodly chunk of weight just a couple of years ago, and was pretty happy and anticipated never having to do that again, because it's not pleasant. And then there I was. Now, I've blamed that on a lot of things. Writing the fantasy novel that seems to be going nowhere, that took all summer to write. That was the longest project I've ever worked on in my writing career, and took all day, every day, the entire summer. I stopped running. I stopped doing any physical fitness. I was eating like a pig. And now, things had slipped before then, and any of you who follow me on Twitter and saw my pictures from Peru, in particular the pictures that Owen said, in which Owen said I looked like Joe Pesci, you'll know that, yes, I put on quite a bit of weight. And then over the summer, it just got worse until I got to bigger than I'd ever been before. And I was very uncomfortable, and I kept thinking, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to fix this. And I didn't, and I didn't, and I didn't. And then at the new year, I don't know what happened, and I just went, you know what? I'm just going to fix it. And Karen wanted to lose a lot of weight also, and so we both working together, we did it. And here's the thing: I've never really had a hard time. Like, discipline has never been my issue. I can just focus on something, and as long as all it takes is hard work, I can get it done. And it's not that big a deal. I have basically the opposite of what you would call an addictive personality. I can just, drop things at the drop of a hat. That's redundant. The problem is, and I've only discovered this recently, is that I'm actually a creature of habit, and it's a question of controlling those habits and changing those habits. What I have to do, and what I think a lot of us have to do, is address those underlying habits that we have. And once those are changed, then everything's fine. And I have a relatively easy time changing my habits. The problem is that the foundation of those habits never seems to go away. So what I've learned through this recent experience is that I have to be ever vigilant against those foundational feelings, those foundational instincts that I have that are not healthy. And there's a lot of different things that I've learned and a lot of different approaches that I've taken, and some of it is self-helpy, I think, but other parts of it are very common sense. One thing that I heard, or actually Karen heard, and she brought to me, and I found very interesting, was that when you're eating chips, for instance, the first one tastes great, and the 30th one never tastes as good as the first one, and there's no reason to get to 30. And trust me, when I sit down at a Mexican restaurant, I'm going to get to the 30th chip relatively quickly. And I still do every now and then, but not nearly as often as I used to. And so lots of things like that, mainly just looking at it like, when it's not like you're never going to have another piece of cake. If you're sitting down and somebody offers you something that's not super healthy and you say no, that's not no forever. It's no for right now. And that will bring you to a place where later on you can say yes every now and then. And it's where I am now, which I'm very excited about. And I don't want this to sound like I think I'm superior, because in fact, what I've learned is I think, evolutionarily speaking, I am not a superior human. I'm actually far closer to what you'd like, maybe on the developmental level of a dog, as far as the strength of my instincts are concerned. I just have good impulse control. But my instincts are always there, and my instincts, for whatever reason, are to eat anything that's put in front of me, and to make sure that I clean my plate. I'm sure I can blame this on my parents if I, squint hard enough. And the problem is that is what gets me in trouble, and that's what gets me to the point where I can lose 40 pounds. And so that I have to constantly keep that in focus. And that's where I am now. I understand that what I'm doing now is I am not like, hey, Ray, I've crossed a finish line. I have to look at this as, this is going to be what it's like for the rest of my life. I don't particularly care for breakfast, for instance. I've never been a breakfast person. Breakfast food doesn't really appeal to me. I love dinners. I love sandwiches. I love things like that. There's a lot of different things of food that I do love from all different cultures from all over the world. But breakfast is not really that big a deal. And so I give up breakfast. I have like a protein shake in the morning. And that's what I have now. And then I have small snacks throughout the day because, as I'm sure many of you are aware, the human body was actually designed to graze, not necessarily eating grass, but to eat smaller amounts over the course of, the hobbits have it right, although I think maybe their portion control is a little wacky. But, so I have small snacks over the course of the day. And I was feeling pretty good about myself and thinking, I'm not, I have friends who are addicted to various things, and we're getting to the age now where not even dangerous addictions are just, only the really bad ones are dangerous. And we have friends, who are getting really bad reports from their doctors, and if people don't start, straightening up, it's not going to be that unusual for some of these folks to have some real problems. So a lot of us are facing this realization that we're going to have to kind of buckle down into this new reality. And I was thinking how lucky I was that I wasn't, I didn't have that addictive personality. And then I realized that I do. But what am I addicted to? You guys know, actually. Many of you, the long-term listeners, will probably know what I'm addicted to. And it's kind of embarrassing when I think about it. It's odd as well. I am addicted to wargame terrain. I cannot pass up wargame terrain. And you guys who have been with us for nearly a decade now will remember all these different projects that I do that destroy the pub. I mean, you should see it right now. It still hasn't recovered from the Captain Con board that I put together for Conflict 47. And all of the crap that I'm putting together for Rogue Stars. And if you see me at a con, I am desperately looking for terrain. Not so much for game systems to use the terrain, although I have to do that to justify the addiction that I have for all this other stuff. But primarily, I'm looking for little resin bits. I'm looking for really cool buildings. I'm looking for all kinds of terrain that 9 times out of 10 might see the board, the light of day once or twice, and that's it. Right now, I'm expecting 4 different buildings in the mail. I'm hoping to get a bunch more science fiction, generic, industrial stuff in the mail. I'm hoping to build, eventually, an entire waterfront that I can either make into a modern, near-future, or, 19th, 20th century waterfront with a variety of ships that I've got, or an Age of Piracy Mediterranean port with the ships that I have for Blood and Plunder. I think I can make an awesome Blood and Plunder board out of a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about. And, I don't even know, I made that enormous island from that wrecked ship, right? I spent a week working on that. I think it came out really cool. We used it once. Now it's on a shelf. That's an addiction. I cannot tell you. I spent $100 at Adepticon. And that was really low for me. Usually I go nutty. And usually it's for some, skirmish game that never gets played, sadly. This year, nobody really got me into a skirmish game, so that was good. But I still managed to drop $100. And what was it on? You got it! Terrain! And I'm happy with everything I bought, too. I'm not like, oh, I can't believe I bought that. I mean, I kind of am. Because when am I going to use this? But it looks beautiful. And so, yeah. So, whatever in my makeup allows me to just stop eating bad and to straighten up and to exercise and to get that whole part of my life straight has never been touched, or has never touched my desire for terrain. And I have every faith that many of you guys have, and gals, have some aspect of gaming that's the same. You gotta have all those cards, or you've gotta have, all those mats or something. And and you're not alone. You are not alone, my friends. Or maybe I am. I don't know. But that's about all I've got to talk about this week. So thanks for listening, and good night.
Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by either emailing us at info@the d6generation.com or by posting in our official D6G episode thread at the top of the DACA Discussions Forum on DACADACA.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming.
The theme from Total Fangirl comes from the soundtrack of The Last Night on Earth, the zombie game, courtesy of Flying Frog Productions, and is a composition of Mary Beth Magalanes.
Remember, we had a small homework assignment for you. Do you remember what it was?
Yes, I do. I had to come up with a soundbite.
Have you figured out your soundbite?
I have some options.
All right.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. Like, what? It's just supposed to be totally spontaneous, isn't it?
Well, it could be.
No,
it could
it's
be not
supposed to sound spontaneous.
No, I know that's the problem. Is forced spontaneity is not.
But it can be like a battle cry, something you say when you roll your dice.
Yeah,
tagline.
It comes and goes so quickly in the intro that nobody will notice that it's not real spontaneity.
Right.
Maybe I should just say forced spontaneity.
Yes.
You can totally do that.
Spontaneity. Yes, you can do that.
No, forced spontaneity. or just actually, you know what I would probably say, because I say it a lot in most of my videos, is I just say dad jokes.
Now go for it. All right, that's good.